Hello, you are very welcome to the Overlap Rugby podcast. I'm Shane, that's Daragh.
Hello.
Two brothers discussing all things rugby from the lens of Leinster and most recently Ireland as well, because we're back with the Six Nations weekend to come. We're going to be covering all those games as well as looking ahead to some of the other rugby that we've missed in the interim. We haven't seen you since Christmas, obviously, so there's been a bit of rugby to catch up on, but mainly we'll be looking forward to the Six Nations too. Later on in the show, we'll briefly round up the club football that's been happening all around the world, I guess. We had the Currie Cup, which we had been covering. That obviously reached its denouement last week. We'll look into that and then review the final. Then we look ahead to some of the Super Rugby that's going to be restarting as well, and then looking across further afield as well, because there will be some Major League Rugby in the US, Japan as well. That league is going to start back soon, as well as South America as well. So
yeah, there's shoots of optimism in the world, I guess, in the rugby world. There's a new season starting, a new international season. I'm very pumped for it, as we should be. It's obviously not the same, and there's still a lot of uncertainty in the air around the game as it is in the world. But yeah, no, we're delighted to be back, delighted to be on for another season. And yes, the main focus of the next number of weeks, and indeed the next 6 weeks, is going to be the Six Nations, proper top level test rugby. There is other test rugby going on as well. It's good to see some tier 2 games happening. They're actually finishing off the Rugby Europe season, so we're going to touch on that. But yeah, no, the main crust of it is Six Nations rugby. It's great to be back. It's great to have some big games to get into this weekend, and that is going to be the crux of the show. Listen, if you do enjoy the content, if you're interested at all in seeing some of the other stuff we put up and seeing some of our previews, give us a subscribe, give us the videos a like. That helps them do well. And actually, the main thing for us is always to join the comment section and to get a good conversation, a good rugby dialogue going. Nice to chat about the games anyway in the context of being, well, at least in our part of the world, in a state of perpetual boredom.
This is true, yes. Rugby is a good cure for some of the boredom we're all feeling in the wake of this as well. But yeah, no better cure than a bit of Six Nations action as well. Test rugby, top level test rugby. We can't wait. Yes, so without any further ado, I suppose,
Absolutely.
we will crack on, because it is a big show. We're just going to start with the Six Nations. Sorry about that, because the Six Nations is just beginning. So we've arrived obviously at a brand new year, but the international season's still getting underway. The hopes that we had last year of maybe having crowds back for the Six Nations obviously hasn't quite come to fruition. But even still, we're excited to see some top quality football, top quality rugby even into and just get to see our teams back on the pitch again, even if we won't be there in person.
Yeah, no, it is. There was optimism last year of having crowds in by this stage, but obviously that's out of ours and the people involved in the sport's hands. It's just one of those things that'll go on and on. The Six Nations is usually a very, very special time for fans and crowds. It's one of the things that makes the competition so great. Is the crowds. Like, it's a very weird dynamic at the moment. No disrespect to the Aussies, but to have like better atmosphere at games in Australia than you have in Europe feels weird. But it is true. Like, that they have the sort of positive energy that comes from having a crowd at their games at the moment, where we don't, and it definitely is telling. But the main thing is obviously that the games are going ahead, and with the context of the virus at the moment, there certainly wasn't an inkling that crowds could be possible.
No, not right.
So it's, as always is the case, seemingly since COVID has come in, we'll just hope for the next window. You know, when we have this window, it's not going to happen. June, by June, sorted. Crowds and pints and the works. We shall see. But yeah, no, there are some interesting sort of narratives going into this tournament. Obviously, last year was noticeable for the game really becoming. The game was very defensive last year, no more so than in Europe, but actually also in the Southern Hemisphere as well. Argentina, the All Blacks, Australia, even Australia probably the least so. Australia and France, but a lot, for the most part, there's a lot of kicking. There's a lot of teams trying to make the majority of their positive plays on the defensive side of the ball. It's, in many ways, like, people are looking for explanations. There's rules issues. There's things like that. In many ways, it seems to me to be a response to what South Africa did in the World Cup. And like, a lot of teams after 2015 tried to take on the identity of of the All Blacks that won that tournament, to try to
Yeah.
play with a lot more flair. You're seeing now that a team that won it with big brutish physicality in defence, that a lot of teams are sort of modelling themselves that way.
That's true. That's partly true. There's also the refereeing side of it. I think that's something that England cited, although I think you're probably right that them getting bullied in the final by South Africa in that style has led them to try and adopt it as well. But also just in terms of how refereeing is being done at the moment, there's a lot of punishment for the team in possession, be it the offside line being haphazard, be it just some of the officiating on the offensive cleanouts that have come in the last season. Teams have like a lot of teams who are a little bit rudimentary or not top level would back themselves more on the defense than the offense to try and at least maintain discipline.
Especially when no sides are attacking particularly well, it becomes immeasurably safer to give them the ball.
Indeed.
That said, these things in rugby tend to be cyclical. They tend not to last. Really, this has come in really since Super Rugby Aotearoa, since the return from lockdown, I would say. Rugby's gone hyper defensive, hyper kicking oriented, and it's been part a response to the law changes, as you say, in terms of not even law changes, but just changing an emphasis, trying to get the offensive breakdown worked out, and the net result of which is just that it's a lot more difficult.
I think it's a combination of those factors. It's that was the most recent one, but also the offside line and also the crossing law, which is a pet peeve of yours, where it seems to have crept up, like where in a few years ago a little shoulder in past contact would be part of running a good solid dummy line.
Not even a shoulder. Like some of the times people, it's like rugby league. It's like rugby league's interpretation of the law, where just any running ahead of the ball is crossing now, and like it used to be the case where you have to have actively blocked a defender who was in a position to make a tackle, and now it simply isn't the case anymore. You're seeing tries chalked off for all kinds of obstruction that is really just the narrowest thing, which I don't necessarily love. I don't think we should be the NFL with blocking, but I think at the same time a little more leniency there, and perhaps a little more sternness and a little less leniency on the offside line could rapidly change it. But the reality is that with teams kicking so much and kicking away opportunities, it's on now coaches and attack coaches to figure this out and to find a way to do it. And I think this championship, it remains to be seen. It's something to look out for, but it could be, you could see some teams, obviously France would be the number one that you'd be looking at, but some teams finding ways to open teams up and to punish them for playing what can be a very passive game style, where you're getting the ball even on the halfway line or even in the opposition half, and you're literally just, we're trying maul, hasn't worked, we're going to set up a box kick and just put you under pressure. It's all about territory and pressure, and good offensive teams, slick rugby, can open that up, and I'm excited to see if anybody does take on that mantle and that challenge. From a team point of view, just to move on from that sort of wee discussion, England are heading into this competition as firm favourites. They're champions of last season, Six Nations, champions of the Autumn Nations Cup. France, though, nipping at their heels for sure. Beat them last season, nearly beat them with their seconds in Twickenham.
The two blemishes on the English brilliant season that was in 2020 were the two French games, in terms of just didn't quite go their whole way, and that rivalry Le Crunch is definitely alive and well.
And likewise no Grand Slam for England, which will be something on their minds given the amount of the percentage of championship wins that they have versus Grand Slams, certainly since the turn of the century or around the late 90s, is actually quite low. They had a Grand Slam in 2003 and they had a Grand Slam in 2016, and I don't think they've had any others. They've won the competition a bunch of times, but they tend not to be able to get over that Grand Slam
elusive
line.
Grand Slam as it is. It's very elusive. Sure, we know very well.
Listen, with France in Twickenham this year, they will be fancying it, and that's certainly going to be an area of focus for them. The other narrative, can one of Ireland, Scotland, and Wales kick on and stop this from becoming a two-horse race, which is what it seems to be going into the competition.
Certainly on paper going in, but things can change, and whichever teams win, obviously with Ireland and Wales facing each other this weekend, which we'll get into later on, like that one or other of those teams will be buoyed by the confidence they'll get for the win, and the other will probably be a bit rudderless as well. Thereafter momentum is such a huge factor in this tournament, but there's no doubt any one of those teams is capable of putting one, then two, then three wins together, and then suddenly they're in a position to challenge for the championship. That's definitely what their goal is. Three of them going in.
Indeed, and I guess the final more minor narrative that a lot of people are sort of dismissing out of hand is whether Franco Smith's Italy can arrive at any kind of success.
Can they get a win?
Can they get a win?
Can they get an 80-minute performance?
These are the questions.
Can they get a 80+% tackle completion rate at the end of the game?
Any of these things would do nicely. Listen, on that subject, Moving on from sort of the broad conversation, we are going to get into the games.
Yes.
And we're going to work through them in chronological order, and we're going to start today with Italy-France, which takes place this Saturday, 6th of February. It's 2:15 UK and Irish time, 3:15 local time in the afternoon. Curtain raiser of the whole tournament in the Stadio Olimpico in Rome. Referee Matthew Carley, the English ref, is going to be taking charge. Weather forecast, obviously, as a weather forecast, subject to change, but it seems like the weather in Rome is nowhere near as hostile as it is being over here in this part of the world, and it's actually going to be quite nice. Not too much wind, warm, dry. Should be good conditions for running rugby. So there's potential optimism in this game in a curious kind of way.
Yes, it could be a nice curtain raiser, and if both teams are coming in with a clean slate in terms of it's a new competition, they want to hit the ground running, and if you have sunshine overhead, it's going to suit certainly France and the way they want to play. But even the more recent signs from Italy with their passing game and their wide offense, the conditions should play into both their hands in that regard, so no complaints at all.
And listen, what we're going to do in the context of the previews this week, because it's the first round of the tournament, we're really going to just separate out the teams, and we're going to look sort of at each team from the match, and we'll talk a bit about the games and what they need to do to win the games. More broadly, we're going to be just discussing where the team's at and what they're trying to achieve this year. And on that, we're going to start with the home team, and that is Italy. Listen, everybody knows it's been brutal for Italy in recent times. We've sort of called them basically what they are, as a tier 2 team in a tier 1 competition. They have won one match. Their last win, I should say, was in round 3 of the 2015 tournament, a 22-19 away win in Murrayfield. They've lost every game since, a 22 match losing streak in a competition with 5 games a year.
It's not good at all. There's no way of painting that or sugarcoating that in any kind of positive light. It's tough. It's tough. Losing mentalities are very tough things to overcome. You can see that in many club sides, and Italy definitely have that perpetually in the context of this tournament. So obviously they have nothing. They have a low bar compared to everyone else going in terms of what they're looking to get out. But there's still points of optimism for them, and like they shouldn't be doom and glooming. They have a fair bit of youth in their squad in terms of the age demographic of their squad is pretty young, which is nice to see.
Average age in the squad of 24. A lot of fresh faces. There has been some shoots of optimism under Franco Smith generally, and it seems like he's trying to really get a clean slate going, and I think the stakes are actually pretty high for Franco and for Italy. The squad is it's in a sense it's bare bones in terms of who the standout players have been. Giraldini has just retired, their stalwart hooker, and a long-time captain as well. Luca Bigi, the other hooker who's now going to be starting, has been made captain, but without big talismanic playmakers in Bram Stain and Jake Pelledri. And interestingly, with Matteo Manozzi opting out of the competition for perfectly understandable reasons to do with the idea of bubbling in a squad away from your family for so long. He's in
London or Coventry with Wasps, isn't he?
That's right.
So he's choosing to stay with the family, which is obviously understandable. There are a few other players doing that as well.
Joe Marler, I believe, was the other one for England. But from an Italian point of view, I'm not suggesting this is the case, but Manozzi, but they don't want to arrive at a position where it just becomes fatiguing even for good players to play for Italy, like especially when there's money to be made in other clubs. They almost it's one of the risks, while club rugby has been so great for tier 2 players in tier 2 countries in a lot of ways, one of the risks you run is that you end up not developing those nations at all, because you're just in effect plundering their talent and having them play their club rugby. And if Italy don't compete, and you get into this stage where they're just showing up to lose every year, and there's a lot of commitment goes into that, and if you're getting more money for playing at your club, people are going to have second thoughts, and that's why I really think that this is a high stakes competition, and I don't think it's without hope. If you look at their squad, there is a lot of young, exciting talent. One of the things that they figured out under Franco Smith seemingly last autumn was how to take some tries in the open space. Marco Zanon has come in at 13,
and it has been a bit of a revelation.
Exciting talent. The wings, whether it's Montigiani, Bellini is a very good player. Sperandio will probably be on the other wing. He's quality as well, and Trula coming in at fullback. They can all finish scores. And then they have that wonderful dynamic with Kana coming in at 12, with Garbisi, who's very exciting, at 10. it's a back line with a lot of optimism, and even without their playmaking back row forwards, you know, the back row that they had last year, where they have Negri in at 6, they have Mbanda coming in at 8, and Johan Meyer, who's another big South African,
useful
who's
unit.
Come in,
yeah.
He's not a bad footballer.
We've known they've been spoiled for choice in terms of riches at back row for quite a while, and Bramstein and Pelledri have been the two standouts at the top of that pile, which is why it's unfortunate for them, obviously in the position that they are, being a bit shorn of quality compared to the top sides, to be without those two is a blow. But in the back row, they're actually better equipped than anywhere to deal with a loss of that caliber, because their depth isn't that stellar in other positions on the field, but in the back row it kind of is.
They still have the capacity to field a decent back row and a back line that can create, if nothing else. So if in that sense we should be excited. From their perspective, in terms of how they want to play the game and what they're really looking to get out of the tournament, I don't think that they need to be moving mountains, but they just need to be like more difficult to play against. They need to sort of discover what Benetton have discovered without winning a lot of matches, which is just how to be an awkward opponent at home, how to stay in games, how not to get sort of broken up in the early parts of the game at least. And listen, they've had sort of limited success doing that, and they might improve if they go on. Like, obviously a bit of belief would be massive. A big performance that gives belief, it just renders those sort of last 20-minute meltdowns less likely to happen. Like a lot of the wounds that they've had inflicted on them have been sort of a result of their own incompetence in some ways,
or just giving up or giving up. All of that, like the difference between their body language in the first and second half is very telling. A lot of it is to do with fatiguing, the fatiguing element of playing top sides like they are, and being outmatched. It's going to wear on you over 80 minutes. But also, there's a fair bit of quitting them that's only come from the fact that their record is such as it is. There's no confidence is only based on evidence, and there's no evidence of them doing any of these systems and actually getting wins from it.
There's no evidence of belief that they can actually win a game, which just makes the stakes of conceding not seem the same. Like, we saw it last autumn in the game against France, where they put together a competent half of rugby, then they concede a try, and then they just fold. Just fold. Like, they'd have no belief that they're in the game once that try is conceded. And so they don't really hustle. Like, you had Xander Fagerson's try that he scored against them for Scotland last year.
The most comical tries you'll ever see in terms of...
The only reason it was comical, a ball bounces up and someone flicks it up to Fagerson, and all the Italian players stop, and Fagerson just trots over from 5 yards as they're all looking at him. And it's try. And... like, that isn't it. Like, no team defending a 1-try lead on 80 minutes is going to let him trot over and score that. But Italy did, because they just get the sense that they're not desperate to stop them from scoring. And a bit more competitiveness would do that. So in terms of how to become more competitive, I don't think, like, obviously they don't have the out-and-out quality to cope with a lot of these sides at times. So they just have to be, what they have to be is just a little less... what am I trying to say? A little more disciplined. In terms of, like, if your opponent is France, and France start balling out and start completing unbelievable offloads and putting together,
which they might,
sensational plays. Of course they might. They're brilliant. France are. But you can live with that if you're Italy. You can live, like, that's a reality that you're going to have to face with, and you're not going to win every game. They're a better side. But what you can't have are just the sloppy mistakes, like easy exits. We're just going to give away a cheap penalty here. Someone's jumped over the ruck, and now all of a sudden they're out of their territory. We're not going to give you sort of cheap tries where we're missing tackles. We're not going to kick balls out into touch on the full. Just limiting the mistakes and playing a more disciplined game. We're not going to give away cheap penalties. We're not going to turn over the ball cheaply. We're not going to give you cheap yards around the ruck. If you're going to score against us and work your way around us, you're going to have to earn it. And I think that just needs to be an emphasis. Just being a disciplined, tight, well-organised team has to be a point of emphasis.
And they have been in the past when they had less talent in the backline than they have now. In like, I would take teams a decade ago that were occasionally a scrap to play against in Rome. And then, as you say, Benetton do have good chops at doing that. They actually have heft in the pack, and they can surprise some teams. They surprised Northampton, I think, in the Champions Cup very recently. I think last season, where they had competitive games with them both on both home and away. And it's like, they're not that far off, but they do switch off at too many times, and some of the looseness like that just plays into it. Part of it's born from belief, but then other sides are just being well drilled. We were imploring them to improve their tackle technique and their first of tackling, and they have. There's been incremental improvement in that. But it's more macro than that, where if you don't believe you're in the game to begin with, then you are going to switch off when the purple patch comes on and the team scores 1 or 2 tries. They do, or they have certainly in the past, just shown a tendency to roll over and play dead, which is no good. It results in too many pumpings at the hands of teams like France, and it's no way to encourage the team or the supporters or anything. So you'd want to see a bit more of a hard nose and a bit more organisation and discipline in what they're trying to do, as well as in terms of improvement. I like the shape they were putting on with ball in hand on a technical point, the wide with multiple distributors in the back line, like a nice idea, and the back row forwards getting involved in the wide channels. They all looked like a good shape that nearly unlocked defences, but for the basic skill of passing. Their passing wasn't crisp enough or accurate enough to unpick those defences, and you'd rather than see them go like abandon that idea, I'd like to just see them get better. Because they are the underdog team, and that involves that means they're probably going to have to score a load of tries to even be within a chance. They're probably going to have to get at least 20 points in a game to have any chance of winning it. So I think certainly in the first quarter, when they have their energy about them, they should be looking to implement their shape and attack maybe slightly sluggish France. We've seen that on day one of Six Nations before. It has taken Les Bleus a few games to warm up in this competition over the years. So yeah, they if they hit the ground running, they have a chance to kind of implement some of their shape and try and implement their game. It's a clean slate as far as the tournament's concerned. It'd be nice to see that.
They actually have to play. They have to play with width if they're going to survive in these games.
Yeah.
Just given the nature of the defensive way that the game is played, and obviously you're facing a Sean Edwards defence that is brutally physical and tough, and it's going to be very difficult to get around it. But in terms of the kicking game, where I just think they can't get trapped in is being super conservative, where you have a line out in the halfway line. You've got someone like a Woki or an Aldred breathing down your neck at the line out, and so you throw to 2, you try and set up a maul, you get a metre or 2, France have covered in, and then all of a sudden that defence is just on top of you from set piece. And then all of a sudden when you're there, what do? You really have to kick it.
Daragh sits deep and hoofs in the air.
RBC can't really kick it from deep. Realistically, you're going to have to box kick it in that situation, and that's where I'd like the scrummies that they have in the squad. Stephen Varney and Callum Brady, actually both English imports, are in there. Stephen Varney's the incumbent, and Palazzani has a number of caps for him as well, the other scrum half. But they're really passing scrum halves, and they're not really game controllers. They're there to set tempo. What Italy have in a game controlling sense is 2 10s at 10 and 12. Canna's evolved into a nice 12, but he's a 10 by trade, and he's a lovely boot, probably a stronger boot than Garbisi.
Yeah, I'd agree.
Yeah, and so both of them have a decent passing game, and both of them crucially have a decent kicking game. So it's vital really that off first phase, off set pieces, they get the ball into those guys' hands, and they get the ball a bit wide, expand the field, make sure that the defence has to defend the whole width of the pitch in behind, and that sets up a better kick.
It does.
Like in terms of just getting down the field and establishing territory, of course it's important. But if Italy are going to try and do the same thing that everybody tries to do, where you're huffing a box kick in the air from a tight space with a line out, France are going to be ready for it. They have better players than it.
They're dangerous, and they're also kick return.
Totally, and also it's just putting a lot of pressure on these Varneys and these Palazzanis.
Yeah, and the back three men as well.
They do knock balls out on the full.
They do.
They do make those kinds of mistakes. And more often than not, you're going to not get the kick quite right, kick it a bit deep to France, and France are going to counter and maybe not score, but move the ball and get the ball more or less back to where you started.
Yeah.
Good kicks involve setting up the defence, forcing them to come a bit wider, trying to disrupt the pendulum.
Pull the wingers up.
Trying to disrupt the pendulum and then finding the space. And Canna and Garbisi are the two players who are best equipped to do it.
Yeah,
indeed.
You'd think so, and you'd think off second or third phase. If you're going to your hypothetical line out in the halfway, go from side to side, or one phase up the middle, then round the corner, then back the other way, and then maybe there's space in the backfield.
Exactly.
That's
where
on
Garbisi and Canna to read that together as well. But it's just so vital that they play with a little bit of bravery, and I think that's probably going to be a theme of the day. It'll be a broken record. It is a defensive game at the moment, but for a team like Italy, it's just You're going to be heaping pressure on yourselves if you just try and play conservative. It's a false idea.
If they end up if you start seeing them slowing up and box kicking to exit after the first kick, and then if they kick a 3-pointer, it's my old classic thing. If they manage to scrap their way into territory and kick for 3-0 and think they're in the game, and it's like, you're not really. You're running out of energy already, and you're going to concede some tries. You need to be gung ho and go for it, because realistically, the way to beat the way they win this game, it's a very slim percentage of a chance, but they can win this game, and it involves them streaking ahead to a 21-0 lead when France are still napping in the changing rooms, and then having the French riposte in the second half.
The other thing about Sean Edwards' defence is it's a counter to the 3-pointer argument, which I know we had in this discussion. Like, Sean Edwards' defences are very, very miserly and very, very tough, but the one kind of area where consistently over the years they've struggled to deal with is like those great All Blacks and great Wallabies teams who move the ball wide and have a scoring threat from deep. And that's something to keep in mind for all teams playing France, is that when you're actually thinking that your tries are going to come from the red zone, that is going to be the toughest place to score. So really, Italy do need to have some plays worked into them where they're trying to break the line, putting in maybe a few attacking kicks, trying to work some space from midfield,
and trying to finish there from the centre, the middle third.
But I don't necessarily hate going for 3 when you're in that position, just because of the way defences are at the moment, where they just aren't letting you score. And I could just see Italy trying to huff it into the corner 3 or 4 times and coming away with nothing against this
potentially
tough defence. I actually think they're going to be easier to score tries from deep than it is from
deep for sure. I just think in the first quarter, that's when Italy's tries are coming, if at all. I don't like unless the last quarter try when it's already 4 tries to 0. That sometimes happens. But if they're to win the game at all, they need 20 plus points, and to do that, they're going to need tries. That's just the facts, I think. But with all that said about Italy, we hope to see incremental improvement, as is always the case.
And they do have some quality.
And they definitely do. So shoots of optimism, as is always the case, leading into a Six Nations. But we will pivot on from Italy and move on to France, who are definitely title contenders. They are certainly second. They were second fiddle to it England last year, but only just. And they really are a coming force. And as I said before, with them kind of with an eye towards the 2023 World Cup, which is kind of it's a ways away yet, but it's not in the French minds because they're hosting it, and they just seem to be building a team very nicely with that in mind. You can see that in the demographic, the age profile of the players involved. They're all quite young. They're all kind of primed to come into their prime for the World Cup, and they've established many things about the way they want to play. They've already gave their second string a run out in the Nations Cup, or the Autumn Nations Cup that was last year as well. So they're getting some good minutes under their belts, and they will be looking to challenge for this Six Nations. They haven't won one in a while.
That's true. They had a breakthrough year. Galtier's side looks very strong. They have some of the best stars in world rugby in the world. Antoine Dupont springs to mind. Even Teddy Thomas. They have some box office talent, and now they have a robust defence under Sean Edwards to come with it. They did convincingly put Ireland to bed, Wales to bed. They did lose to Scotland, but came back and beat them in the Autumn Nations Cup in what felt like an important statement win for them out in Murrayfield. Obviously they will be frustrated. 2 second place finishes in 2 tournaments, very, very close, beating England and then losing to Scotland and losing out in the Six Nations. It's still a work on for them. Likewise, we'll talk about in more depth next week, but heading to Dublin, where they haven't won in a decade as well, that's going to be a big factor for them. So they definitely still have some obstacles to overcome, but it feels like the next big step forward for this team is winning a trophy. I think that's where they have to go from here if they're not going to regress or sort of plateau out. They have to take that next step forward and win a trophy, and I think they'll be acutely aware of that. A Six Nations which involves trips to Twickenham and Dublin is as tough as it comes for France, and while there's no crowds, like, it would be mighty impressive if they came away with a win here. I still would make England favourites, but that's the task that's before them.
Yes, it is. In terms of the squad then that they have, obviously they're spoiled for choice as far as talent. We got to know a little bit of the guys in behind in the Autumn Nations Cup last year as well. There are a few notable guys missing. They'll be without Ntamak, Demba Bamba, Virmi Vakatawa
right.
and Camille Chat as well. They'd normally be straight into the match day 23, all of those guys.
Gregory Aldred was out of the squad and now he's back into the squad as well, which is interesting.
Mm-hmm.
They had a more expanded training squad, but the COVID restrictions in France are pretty robust at the moment, and actually they have a limit on the amount of players they can have. They can have 31 players.
Right. Like a World Cup.
But interestingly, I don't believe those players can play in the top tours for the entirety of the tournament.
Oh, okay.
Because they have to be bubbled as a group. So they have like this World Cup squad, which is together for 6 weeks, can't be disjointed, but also they can't bring in the reinforcements like other sides like Ireland have a very big squad, for example.
Yeah.
They don't have that luxury at the moment, France. So they had to cut their squad down to 31. And so it'll be interesting. And in terms of the team that'll play, obviously some of those guys you mentioned might come back. Vakatawa though I think is gone for at least the first half of the tournament, so that's a big loss.
Right.
Ntamak as well, missing definitely disrupts them somewhat. They might tinker with the side somewhat for this Italy game, but I suspect they'll go back to more or less their usual.
They will. Considering they're not playing the top tours rugby, as you said, they'll probably want to build a bit of momentum for their starters as well.
The tight five feels extremely settled. Cyril Bay, Marchand, Mohamed Ouas, Bernard Leroux, Paul Willemse.
Yeah,
that's like a quality. It's a big scrummaging engine room, but they actually get through a heap load of work. Leroux and Willemse were near top of the tackling stats.
Yes, that's right. They've found some really good locks. They were without them for many years. They've kind of, it's in terms of pieces of the puzzle.
Mahina went, and all of a sudden,
Mahina was a big mystery, a big red card machine.
Francois Croix is out with an injury, I believe, for the start of the tournament as well.
Right.
So that leaves them with options in the back row with Dylan Cretan, Greg Aldred, who we're not sure if he's going to play or not.
He's been in and out.
But they do have some exciting players. Jalanche is an exciting player. But Cameron Wokey for me is
has to start. I would think
becoming one of the elite back rowers, certainly at line out area.
Yeah, his stealing it too. It's like next level. We've seen from the likes of Peter O'Mahony how to do that skill very well. But with the way Wokey springs from the ground, he's so good.
He's been torturing teams in the top 14.
Yeah,
he's a phenomenal talent. And if you look at like France's plans for 2023, you'd have to think that Wokey would be pretty well in there.
But
so I would suspect Wokey will get a run out, if not this week, then onwards in the tournament.
Yeah,
and then that back row, you've Dupont at 9, probably Jalibert over Carbonell, simply based on what happened last November.
Probably, yeah.
Carbonell arguably lost in that final off the bench.
Arguably, it's true. Yes.
Whereas Jalibert
was so clutch, and you were saying it was going to involve a coming of age performance for Jalibert, and sure enough, it did. But it was not quite enough to do. They're still the nearly men. They're very, very close to where England are, and they have all these bags of talent. Then in terms of the back line as well, like you could pick 3 different back lines from the French the potential starters here, but we have the likes of Vincent Rattez.
Rattez actually lost out on the squad. He was one of the guys who was dropped from down to 31
for when it was cut to 31. So we won't see Rattez, but you might see Ficou, who is lined up on wing and centre on multiple occasions. Arthur Vincent will probably be at 12. Without Vakatawa, it leaves a hole at 13. Do you go Pinot, who's played there before? Do you go Ficou as well?
This other lad, Pierre-Louis Barassi, as well, could be a shout as well. Either they have a rake load of options, but what they tend to bring is just a real rhythm and a read, fueled by Dupont and his tempo and his vision and his creativity. But
they run from depth, and they run
great
great support tracking lines to a man, and they can all offload off left and right hand. So it's a must.
Vakatawa is probably the top performer in that outside back in terms of creating, so that he's a loss
for sure.
He definitely makes them weaker, but they still have buckets and buckets of talent. And I remember what their second string did to Italy last November.
Indeed,
and I wouldn't worry. Villiers is a guy who looks like he has a high ceiling.
He's been brilliant, and then you have Teddy Thomas as well, the very dangerous Teddy Thomas, and then Anthony Boutier at fullback, who's a rock and with a rocket of a boot.
And Brice Dulin breathing down his neck as well.
Who has been in excellent form too. So they're an embarrassment of riches, as is often the narrative when you're looking at a French squad going into a Six Nations. You're just like, how is this team not going to romp home and win everything? But no, they haven't done it just yet, but they do look more organised. And we'll just, I suppose, pivot on to what they want to do on the field with that squad and with that embarrassment of riches that they have. We've seen them become more rounded. We've definitely seen, as you say, rhythm and tempo being the key to their offensive structure, and they can tend to pick apart those very structured defences by executing in those chaotic moments that are being afforded them in this kind of kicking oriented game that we've seen in the Northern Hemisphere. Like we saw them punish Ireland, dash our hopes in Paris. They were very slim hopes, but they were dashed nonetheless from kick return, from a loose kick that was easily transitioned into a try. They are very, very dangerous to a man. And the attack is definitely going to be at the forefront, they'll hope, in this game, because it's sunny conditions, running rugby in Rome, looking to get a bit of momentum going forward into the tournament. But what's really more interesting is their defence, I thought, in terms of a build from, like, we know that France can attack, even when they've been at their most abysmal, they can be lethal. But what they have tended to not be able to do is defend accurately and enthusiastically for 80 minutes, and we've seen that change seismically since Sean Edwards has come in, as he's done for every team he's joined. The man is just pretty undeniable as far as defensive coaching credentials.
It's a simple one. It's a slightly different defence to what he had in Wales, in the sense that there isn't quite as much attacking of the ball. There isn't quite as much jackling. They're statistically, their top turnover threat is Antoine Dupont. He's the guy who has the most jackals for them last season. Which isn't a bad thing. Like, he's a guy who can get in.
He's near the breakdown.
The sense of it is, if you have someone, and Antoine Dupont, such a playmaker anyway, so tough. It's not a bad hustle, but really it's only if you see there's a real opportunity are you going for it. Generally, it's just it's discipline, and it's sort of line speed and aggressive tackling. And that's why you see, like, a lot of teams are trying to plough into them. Their red zone defence against England was awesome in the Six Nations last year. Willemse and Leroux were topping those tackle stats, getting up in teams' faces.
They were dominant tackles as well.
Yeah, exactly. Just winning contacts and forcing teams to kick it to them in the earliest exchanges of offensive sets. So you haven't actually really seen from anybody a true test of what's going on outside 13 or in and around that channel. Nobody's really tried to work that against them that often.
We haven't seen.
What you have seen is just a lot of teams not find no holes in and around around the ruck and the 10 channel, just nothing there.
It's plugged. And then, like, that used to be, there were all kinds of Joe Schmidt related strike plays to pull apart lazy runners folding around the corner of the first ruck from set piece. That used to be a very, very key scoring avenue against the French. It used to be there all the time, and it just isn't these days with this French team, and that is a huge change, and it makes them just so much more difficult to play against. Obviously, for the likes of Italy, it's going to be a tough task to break that defence down. But from France's point of view, they don't want to start slow. They want to start by, as you say, assertively dominating the collision zone from early on, setting that platform, and then their offense can take off from there. That's pretty much their picture is built. Like, even for an attacking team, their defense is what kind of has given them confidence, because they know that they can repel some of these great teams.
On both offense and defense, the emphasis is on winning individual battles. And where we talked about Italy in the sense of not having confidence and not really making those hustle plays, France are the exact opposite. They're covered in belief, and every good play from a player just adds to that. And so they're, like, on both attack and defense, they're not forcing the issue, they're not going mad, but they are being aggressive and are just looking to exploit the opposition's weaknesses, and on an individual level just winning your battles. One-on-one battles being won.
Key to fundamental good rugby. If you're not doing that, you're going to lose the game 100% of the time. So you need to front up and win your battles. But as you say, it's a less prescriptive approach. They're certainly not kind of being told that on this phase you do this, and then on the next phase you do that, and then on the next phase we do that.
A lot of
scope
is given to Dupont more than anybody. To read the game,
and they do have basic shape, more depth and more width than most in terms of how they line up. But it's designed to let those players, once they have their hands on the ball, try and unpick the defence themselves by winning those battles.
And exactly, just winning the contact, winning the breakdown, ball is quick, Dupont goes, and then they strike off
or
that.
Getting the offload away, which they're not averse to. They will try it, and players will run positive supporting lines, tracking lines off if they see it's on. The
other factor that's been so massive to them, which I think is going to count against Brice Dulin in his bid to unseat Boutier, is just in the context of how rugby has been these days, with the amount of kicking, the length of and precision of Boutier's long boot. It has dismantled a lot of teams. It did for England last year. Their attempt
for Ireland.
Just their attempt to bottle teams up in their own 22.
It falls flat when you have a guy who can pump it deep. Like, we've seen it with France Stain and South Africa for a few years. Like, if you can just pump the ball from your own goal line to the other's 22, like, it just means that a lot of those, like, we're just set off, the line out didn't go to plan, we're on the 10 metre line in your half, and we're gonna box kick because we're out of ideas. It's a terrible idea against France, not just because they're gonna kick return sometimes if it's too deep and they have a chance, but because if they have to recycle it, they can give it to Boutier and just kick you right back where you came from.
He sits deep into the pocket and launches it deep. And in the context of the modern game, they also have a very good defensive line following it up, but so few teams are willing to attack off that kick. Most will kick by way of riposte, and then you're just winning the territory battle and getting out of your area. So their exits have been so good. It's been so difficult to lock France in their 22 because of the weapon that Boutier brings with his boot. And that is that's a huge little area for them. And finally, just on the subject of the set piece, which we didn't really touch on for Italy. I mean, the scrum is just phenomenal. It's so tough. The engine room is so strong. They have such a serious pack weight and such a serious advantage there,
and such a tradition of it. They're trying to like in terms of the character of a French rugby team. It is kind of jouet when it's out wide and ball in hand, but they respect the set piece. As much as any team in the world, they really do value a good dominant scrum.
Uas is in there because he can lock down a scrum really well. Marchand is more of a playmaker from hooker, but really the advantage is at loose head, where Cyril Bay is an excellent scrummager, and Jean-Baptiste Gros, who comes on off the bench, is an excellent scrummager as well. Indeed. So if Italy aren't careful, that could certainly be an area they try to attack.
Indeed, and then the other set piece line out as well. Italy without Bram Stain, who is a huge leader for them in their line out. I think he calls it a lot of the time as well, and he certainly is involved on the defensive reading of their line out. He's not going to be available, and you do have a guy in Cameron Wokey, if he's to start, who could just torment them in that particular set piece.
Especially with Luca BG, who hasn't been a starter and now coming in and now captain.
Yeah, it's pressure. Pressure on the darts.
Yeah, you could really do a job on BG, and then that would
lead to them unraveling.
Yes, for sure.
Yeah.
The final note on France as well is just that when we talk about them being a well-rounded team, one of the key notes that came out of that England game, and just a couple of areas where they needed to work on was to do with discipline, and specifically giving away penalties. Interestingly, they've brought in Jerome Garces into their coaching staff
to try and work on that.
So there seems to be some shrewd moves being put in to try and just round out this side and make them play perfect rugby. So I think they're fancying themselves to take the step forward.
That's exactly. Well, they're all looking for incremental improvement, like all the teams, like Italy we were saying as well. But with France especially, it seems like this is a macro plan. Like 4-year cycles, we were saying it is overblown. Like Erasmus demonstrated that you can do it in 18 months. You don't need a 4-year cycle. But France definitely are look like a team with purpose for the first time in well over a decade in terms of the last 2 years, and it feels like the 2023 World Cup is the end goal. So with that in mind, they were very good last year, although they got 2 seconds. The next step, as we said, is probably silverware. They're going to be trying to win this competition now that they're in it, but ultimately having an eye forward to that World Cup that's coming. So it's exciting to watch France, and then this is a perfect kind of get yourself warmed up kind of game.
Well, in terms of how you think it'll go,
I think it'll go exactly the way I was just about to say. I think France will probably they might start a little slow, and Italy could be combative in the first quarter. I would like for the game to see Italy go 14 or 21-0 up, and then have France have to come back. But I don't think it's going to happen. I think Italy might go 6-3 up, and then France will probably score the first try, and maybe quite a few more if conditions are suitable, and if they get their tails up and momentum is with them, then I don't think Italy have the tools to stop them.
I was about to say it's a hard one to call, but I suppose it isn't.
It's not.
But I mean, my thinking on it is just I don't quite know what to expect from Italy, because while I do know what to expect, I fear for it. I think it's important for Italy to play well right away, or to show some improvement right away. So while the result is the result, it probably will be a big France win. I think really what you need to see from Italy is just disruption and being difficult to play against. They're at home.
Like we saw Benetton played Munster last week and were in a proper scrap against a better team.
And for the majority of that game, well, Munster are not close to France in any kind of way. You felt like Munster were going to pull away. And while they did win the game, they didn't pull away. They had to rescue it at the end because they controlled the tempo of the game. They controlled where the ball was. They minded it when they had it. They didn't give away stupid penalties. They played with discipline and focus, and just became a very frustrating team to break down. And Italy need to learn from that. They need to just be not like
soft.
Yeah, soft isn't the right word. Just not stupid when the pressure gets put on. Don't compound things. Except if a great try is scored, fair enough. But in the meantime, we're giving them nothing soft, and that's what I want to see from Italy. If I see them giving away soft things, it's just going to be another painful year. And I think I have a bit more hope for Franco Smith's side than that. So I'm going to predict Italy disrupt France, hopefully, for a decent portion of the game. I think France will have enough to win, but maybe 22 to 14.
Oh, I thought you were going to say 22-point margin.
No, 22 to 14.
Yeah, I'll kind of branch it out a bit more.
You take the over on
I'll
that
take
one,
the
right?
over on that one is what I'll say. I think I will and all. But okay, with that I suppose we'll park that game then.
Absolutely. Yes, so moving on now to the next game, the second game of this first Six Nations weekend of 2021. We have the Calcutta Cup, an early bit of silverware on the line.
That's right, actually.
Historical bit of silverware. England are playing Scotland Saturday, 6th of February, 4:45 GMT, Twickenham.
Yes.
Great game, box office. I always love watching these two go at it.
Yes,
it has been a close game in recent years, despite
it has.
The different fortunes
a couple
of the two
times
teams
over the last few years, which is fun. That hadn't always been the case, but I think England are currently in possession of the Calcutta Cup. So should it be a draw, it'll be retained by the English, and it has been a draw. I mentioned in years gone by.
It was a Scotland win, then a draw. Yeah, it was awesome. And then last season England won it back in Murrayfield by a 7-point margin, 13-6 in a wet one.
Yes.
The weather, there could be a wet one this week. It's been dodgy enough, in London, but could be some rain, could be some winds. Could get away with it either. Yeah. Obviously, it's all up in the air. But it'll be winter ball, but hopefully not too bad.
Yes, that's what we hope. And it will be reffed by the man in the middle, Andrew Brace, as well.
Andrew Brace, who's RFU, who's very dodgy, to be honest. I hope he doesn't disrupt things too much. I mean, we're going to have a broad conversation about issues with the laws, and one of the issues that we have with the game, not to get too bogged down in it, is just the overemphasis on individual refs. Like, it comes from old rugby, but I've been watching the NFL. I much prefer how the NFL is refed, and it's not about one ref. It's a little more prescriptive, but it's just the margin for error with some of these guys can be massive.
Yes, it's true.
But anyway, just to park that, hopefully we won't be speaking about Brace again.
No, hopefully not, but brace yourselves for it.
Yes, but we are, as we're doing with all the previews here, going by team, looking obviously as the first game of tournament in the broadest sense, what the team wants to get out of the tournament, what the team's going to be made up of. And then also, obviously what they want to do in this game to ensure they get the win.
Yeah.
We're going to start with the hosts of this game, the champions, the Autumn Nations Cup champions, World Cup runner-up, Calcutta Cup holders, favourites, England.
England,
Eddie Jones's team enjoyed a phenomenal season in 2020, backing up their great World Cup with claiming not one but 2 trophies. I guess I'm not counting the Calcutta Cup in that. 2 competitions won. The Six Nations and the Autumn Nations Cup. The shine was a little taken off by just that
pesky French.
Yeah, the narrative that's developing with the French in the background, obviously.
Yeah.
But they're in a very, very good place, needless to say, going into this. They're still aside in a very good place, but expanding the game and rediscovering some offensive prowess seems to be on the agenda for Eddie Jones in terms of how he's talking.
One would hope so, yeah, indeed. Like, there was a lot of kicking going on in the Nations Cup from them. They were defending, they were winning games with 30% of the ball, which is obviously impressive from your defensive coach's point of view, but on a neutral rugby watching kind of point of view, you want to see a bit more from them.
In terms of being a completely well-rounded, dominant team, the offense is a key part of the game, and that's something that they're going to have to rediscover to some extent, I'd imagine, in this tournament if they want to win it. But needless to say, England now, after runners up, winning the Six Nations, winning the Autumn Nations Cup, they want really a Grand Slam is where they want to go with this. Obviously, winning the competition is always priority number one. Retaining the Six Nations is a massive thing. But kicking on and winning a Grand Slam and really establishing themselves as the dominant force in Northern Hemisphere rugby is the first port of call for England, and then they'll get to take on those big boys down south and try and make themselves the best team in the world, which is they're not far off.
No, and that's their that's definitely their goal. But it starts with a match against Scotland, as it so often does. Just looking at the squad then going in, England are kind of in a curious spot. Obviously, everyone's affected by COVID, same as everyone the world over. We were saying that France,
not New Zealand.
Not New Zealand,
of course,
but in terms of the squads, England picked a similar size of squad, but then also have a backup training squad, or not a training squad, but kind of a reserve squad of sorts as well, which is interesting. And then with all that, they have like an embarrassment of riches to pick from, much like France as well. So there are some players missing out. There are some players opting out. You mentioned at the top of the show, Joe Marler has elected not to play for COVID reasons. Doesn't want to isolate from.
I believe George Cruz is gone as well. He's off in Japan, so I think that's where he's playing his trade. A long list of names. Obviously, no Ben Spencer still out of favour. Sam Simmons, European Player of the Year, not selected. Joe Simmons not selected. Nathan Hughes not selected. Don Brandt, Sam James not selected. A lot of back rowers, obviously, they're just so strong in that area. Jack Noel is injured, Joe Launchbury's injured, Manu Tuilagi is injured.
Sinclair is suspended for the opening round, I see.
That's right, and Mako Vunipola is injured for the time being. He's expected to return, but obviously no Joe Marler, no Mako Vunipola, no Kyle Sinclair.
That means it's kind of a new scrum.
It's a new scrum.
They do still have their European champions are Exeter, and Exeter have a bloody good scrum, and they do have a few extra men to pull from as well.
Harry Williams as well, and Will Stewart is the other option at tight head. I mean, their team is extremely settled beyond there. Chances are it's going to be Genge in at loose head, Jamie George probably getting the nod over Cowan Dickey, but it could go either way. Will Stewart likewise with Harry Williams. In at lock, you've had Laws, and obviously Vitoji in one position. They might bring Johnny Hill in. First of all, he's played brilliantly for them, and second of all, he's so huge. He's going to help that scrum to be stable
and the line out as well. He's a monster of a man.
Back row picks itself at the moment. It's still Currie, Underhill and Billy V. Actually, I think I read somewhere just today, I hadn't read it before, that Underhill might be out for this game. So I might double check that, but if he's out, I think Ben Earl comes straight in.
And they have the likes of Willis as well in the squad, and there's just whoever falls out of the back row, there is a very, very good option to come in, and a hungry one as well, because we've seen that even in the Nations Cup they were rotating it, and the guys who were coming in were taking their chance. You see it a lot with teams with a lot of quality, that when players do get to manage to take the field, that they're just chomping at the bit. England have a lot of that in terms of competition for places in this squad, as settled as it is. So I'd expect them to be ferocious and physical in the pack, as you always do expect from them.
They have options in the midfield. They have been going with Ford whenever he's fit. Ford's been in at 10, running the offence with Farrell and Henry Slade at 13. It's a lot of distribution and not a lot of sort of attributable ball running in that midfield.
Well, there's a big Tuilagi shaped hole in that midfield.
And Ollie Lawrence seems like a guy who's decently placed to plug that hole for the time being, and maybe in the future. So I wonder if they'll give Ollie Lawrence a go in the midfield, especially against a Scottish defence that has really struggled, especially in that midfield.
You can punch holes very easily if you're looking to.
Exactly. They might go with someone like Redpath at 12, who's uncapped and more like a distributing type of player, and a young guy. Like, I would wonder if they wouldn't go for sort of a battering ram in a Tuilagi frame. And not Lawrence isn't all that in terms of he's not
Tuilagi.
No, he's not all that in a bad sense. I mean, he's not all a battering ram. He's got some subtleties to him, but he is a good direct runner.
Yes,
and a guy they might think about getting in the centre just for balance's sake. Be that dispensing with either Slade or Ford. Probably I wouldn't say they get rid of Farrell.
I would think Farrell would be the 10 in that dynamic. They were doing a bit of that, and we saw it in the World Cup where they have different moulds for it. Either you have Farrell at 10 with Tuilagi at 12 at the time, or you have the Ford Farrell axis and kind of go a bit more circumspect. Depends how they want to play it. It's just different horses for courses kind of thing, or different tools for different tasks. Depends how they want to attack the Scots, I suppose.
Speaking of just sort of in the broadest sense, how England want to go about things. It's been like last year. It felt like such a reactive year to what happened to them in the World Cup final. They were swallowed up by that Springboks defence. Ford and Farrell were just taken out of the game. They never were able to get anything off from an offensive point of view. They were always reactive. They were never able to bottle their opposition up in the 22. And so they've responded by playing, especially towards the tail end of the season, a pure defensive game. Like their attack has had lots of nice little attacking kicks, but for the most part it was not kick to recover, it was kick to defend from anywhere outside really the final attacking third. It was just kick to defend, apply pressure, and even from that point of view, John Mitchell's defence has been it's been incredible in terms of points conceded. Vicious on the gain line and around the ruck, dominating collisions, hunting the ball, suffocating offences before they have a chance to get going. I'd like what that performance against Ireland, where they gave them all the ball and never let them in until like 10 minutes to go for a consolation score, but they were just utterly dominant in all of those collision zones.
Yeah.
And it was mighty impressive, Springbok-esque defending from them last year.
Especially in the tight exchanges, they're second to none in this competition, one would argue. They're second to the Springboks in terms of the World Cup, but in the Six Nations they are the big strong bullying team, and they will lean on that to get themselves going. They'll try to apply some of that physicality to the Scots, who, if you can meet them on the gain line and drive them backwards, a lot of the rest of the Scottish picture can kind of fall apart, as you say, before it begins, from that suffocating kind of lead blanket of a defence. What can be an antidote to it is the Finn Russell, the mercurial passing game of Finn Russell can pick them, can find the space at the edges and the extremities, so whoever is in those centres will have a job to do in terms of linking that defence, because as cohesive as they are in the tight, and in that Ireland game you cited, Ireland very rarely, if ever, managed to execute enough to execute a few passes to get to those outside
and we did isolate some moments where it did feel like teams could attack the space, Ireland in particular in that example, but actually Scotland as well. Like a lot of teams, they didn't have too much in the way of testing of the robustness of the defence in the 13 channel.
Yeah.
Teams just weren't going there, and really they were stopping offences from getting there.
Yeah.
Like if you look at the record, it was I believe it was in last year's in the whole of last year, it was 114 points conceded in 9 games, which is average of under 13 points per game.
It's very
in
good.
terms of points conceded. That's top level defence. They really weren't letting in. They conceded 6 against Scotland last year in the Calcutta Cup, 7 against Ireland in a game. Just not really giving anything away from a defensive point of view. So that'll be massive for them. But I do feel as though they're not going to get away with treading water from an offensive point of view forever.
No.
And you saw that in the French game. They in moments that they were on top, but they weren't actually, when push came to shove, and for once a tight game for them where the game was in the balance, they weren't quite fluid, and they weren't quite able to turn it on and turn it off. And so that'll be an area of massive emphasis for them. I think against a Scotland team, where they'll get confident the more they're in the game. And they've had issues in defence in the midfield. They're going to be disjointed again. There's no Sam Johnson in the squad this time. It's going to be more new faces in the midfield, more young guys from the Premiership. England do need to test them out, to run at them, to physicalise them and get over the top of the ball and move the ball around the corner and just fracture this defence. I think they have the capacity to do it. When they're at the best, they're in lovely flow. They do,
yeah. Well, when they attack well, they set a lovely and very near indefensible tempo. But when their rhythm is knocked, sometimes they're a little bit slower to get back on it, and they're much more willing to just lean on the kicking game. If they're disrupted at all in terms of their ball and hand stuff, they will kick it away a lot. Or that's certainly what we've seen thus far. And you'd hope that in a game against a home game against Scotland and a curtain raiser for the tournament, that they'll play with a little bit more endeavour and ambition with the ball. But this is it's grading by a high bar, because they still, they conceded so few points, as you said, with their defence, and they tended to score more points than they conceded in each of these games, which is the key to winning them, regardless of the colour of it.
But just in the context of this game, I do think it's going to be important for them to score some tries. I think it's going to be important to them to dominate it physically on the offensive side of the ball, and then to move it around the corner and rediscover some of that rhythm. They have a million screen runners. They put guys in all kinds of channels. They sit down. They sort of put one man on two from an attacking point of view, and sit down 2 defenders, clear the ball super quickly, and then move it again, get it into Farrell and Ford's hands with just oceans of space to work with, and pick the right holes. It can be a beautiful thing to watch. And I think it's going to be important. I mean, if they're in this position where they're edging the physical battle, but they're happy to kick 3-pointers, and they're happy to work the pressure by kicking it and giving it to Scotland, you are putting the game in Finn Russell's hands. And Finn Russell is, he's the most technically gifted, the most skillful out half in the world, I think, comfortably. Now that, unless Dan Carter's still playing, he might be, I don't know. But Finn Russell is a phenomenon in terms of his distribution skills, and I mean, England have been made to pay the price for putting the game in his hands in times gone by.
They have.
He's beaten them with Scotland. He beat them with Scotland. He's beaten them with the Barbarians. He overcame a 31-point deficit to cut them open in the second half in Twickenham the last time Scotland played here.
It's true.
He didn't play in the lost Calcutta defeat, which again, it was a tight game. If Finn Russell had been there, it was a 7-point game. Would he have been a difference maker? I really think that England need to get the job done on the offensive side of the ball and not put it all on their defence against this guy who's one of the elite attacking distributors in the game.
Yes, he is, and he is a break of the mould of the Six Nations, which tends to be very narrow in terms of the
You're
attacks.
not going to get this guy not to attack. I mean, as much as every other team has been kicking the ball away, Finn's version of kicking the ball away is getting frustrated that he doesn't see anything and trying a chip that isn't on.
Yeah.
That's how he gives the ball away. But he's not going to just aimlessly he's certainly not going to spend a game aimlessly heaving the ball downfield for them to defend. He's going to try things. He's going to try and get a read on the defence and move the ball. And you are playing with fire if you back your defence to get it done against them.
And we've seen that before. Sure, he in terms of Racing and Saracens as well, because England at their offensive best can look like a very well polished Sarries team. Yeah. At their worst, they see like with Sarries in that quarterfinal, they're a little bit slow, a little bit ponderous. Don't rack up the scores for their large period of physical and dominance and control, and then one breakaway moment, one little chip recovered.
Saracens were utterly dominant in that game. Yeah, totally on top of it, and then gone.
Yeah, exactly.
Because they didn't make the scores happen on offense, and Finn punished it.
Yes.
So they have to be careful. The other things, like from an offensive point of view, you talk about kicking the ball away. Like Stuart Hogg has had nightmares dealing with clever kicks in
That's
behind.
true, and England are great at attacking kicks.
So it's just, even just being a little braver in the sense of moving them around, working those shapes that we talk about, just to disrupt the pendulum and put a ball. It doesn't even have to be a precise ball, just but a low grubber in behind Stuart Hogg. Those balls are torturing him.
They give him nightmares at the moment.
He's finding it so hard to deal with them. He's making all kinds of mistakes. It was actually the crucial mistake in the Calcutta game last year was a Stuart Hogg failing to deal with those balls. He's giving away tries, giving away territory. Like, as much as he's a great player, he is at the moment not confident dealing with those balls. In England, with Ford and Farrell and Slade and whoever they want daily, they can all put clever kicks in behind, and they could torture him in that area. And I definitely
think Johnny May hounding him down. Johnny May is still their most sharp offensive unit in terms of like it can only be a moment, but if the ball's in Ford or Farrell's hands and they see a mismatch and they'll kick it to Johnny and he will convert a lot of the time.
Indeed, so a lot of people are determined to tell you that the defensive, the way the game is with kicks and defense is just the way it needs to be. Like, it's the sensible thing to be doing at the moment. And while there's some truth to that in terms of how tigerish defenses are, when I look at the matchup of England's offense against Scotland's defense, especially out wide in the back line, it would be senseless of them to play that way. They really do need to attack, because if they attack, there are tries out there for them, and there's the scope to put this game away.
Yeah, for sure. And that'll involve a few things like launching off set piece. Obviously, we were highlighting it'll be a disrupted in terms of personnel in the front row. It'll be slightly disrupted, but I'd still expect them to try and lock down their own.
It'll be interesting. It'll be interesting to see, because Sullivan's going to come out and attack them. Yeah, there's no doubt about that.
Scotland scrummage aggressively, so it will be a bit of a scrap, and I'd expect it to and fro a few ways, and England will hopefully, from their point of view, manage to lock it down and then get on top as they're getting on top.
There's scope for being annoying. They will miss Joe Marler in this, but sort of the dark arts and the tricks of the scrum, like Fagerson and Sutherland are such phenomenal scrummagers, but Andrew Race, one of the worst scrum refs out there, and he's Mr. crouch, bind, takes forever, and like England can just go in and out and confuse it, and Brace tends to take forever to set up scrums, and then he very often gets the wrong decision, and so there's definitely scope for a bit of wiliness from England
or Scotland.
Or Scotland aren't wily though. They're not. They're going to be bullish and aggressive, and they also feel like they might have the edge at the scrum, so they're just going to want to scrum clean. They're just going to want to get on top of England. But if England sort of paint the wrong picture and get a lucky penalty from Brace or a free kick, it's the kind of thing that could tilt Scotland as well. So I would wonder if they wouldn't be thinking about plotting tricks and plotting.
It's true. It is the worst aspect of Brace's refereeing is the way he does scrums, and it's a pretty common trend in the Pro 14 I'm seeing compared to, like, because the refs have obviously been kind of domesticated in terms of this COVID times as well. You have to stick in your regions, but Pro 14 scrums are just never going to the dominant scrum. They're not getting the dominant scrum. Just does not
always
get rewarded.
Illegal, apparently.
Always illegal. Always not driving straight. And it's like, no, they're just winning the scrum. Why won't you give the penalty? Whereas you watch the Currie Cup in South Africa, obviously they're going to reward dominant scrums. Top Couture's going to reward dominant scrums. Premiership rewards dominant scrums. So it is a factor with Brace. And yes, the bind thing, the delayed bind that feels like it's trying to buy a. It's like crouch, but you went early, and it's like, why are you elongating the word? Just bind. It's
trying to get a free kick out of a scrum. So it'll be interesting to see if England have any hustles and subtleties in sort of the dark arts area of the pitch as well. But listen, generally speaking, very, very solid team. Just need to work on the offense. The defense is exceptional. It might not be able to contain Finn Russell for 80 minutes, but it shouldn't have to.
Yeah, they need to rack up the score that makes it impossible for Finn to get them back into and smother them. And their confidence is a brittle confidence in Twickenham, and if England do go 2 scores ahead, I'd expect them to kind of steamroller and flex their muscles in terms of they'll get the confidence and Scotland will kind of wilt because here we are again kind of thing. But that's definitely the English picture. However, I suppose there are 2 sides to this, and we can swing on to Scotland, who will definitely have their hopes in terms of performing in Twickenham. They were very close, as you said, the last time they were here, but as it is always, they are the nearly men. Yeah, I know, it's a Groundhog Day with Scotland. Really, every season we start with the same kind of spiel of vague optimism and can they put it together. And again this year, there's as good a case as any for making that one. Is this going to be the year where they break through and become nearly men, as you say? They're so nearly at the nearly men stage. Yes. Well, the true nearly men are the likes of your Irelands and your Waleses. They're kind of nearly men at the moment.
Wales, to be fair to them,
they were nowhere men
when Wales get good, they get returns. To be fair to them, they're less. Ireland and France at the moment I would categorise as the nearly men.
Probably true.
But Scotland are sort of nearly at that level. So they're the nearly men at the moment. But listen, last season, they were deprived of Finn Russell. They had to find a different way to win games, and they did.
Yeah.
They found a new sort of more rudimentary style which suited the year that was in it.
Yeah.
And played some effective winning rugby. Like we talked about Italy not giving away stupid penalties, not making stupid mistakes.
Scotland did
playing
a lot of that.
Tight, disciplined, good rugby.
Scrummaging well, getting the line out working, launching from your set piece. Occasionally kicking to regather, kicking an aerial contest, slowing the tempo
slowing tempo and winning the physical battle. And they feel now that they might have a pack that's capable of matching and going toe to toe with the best packs out there. And certainly they did.
As tough a test as they come is going to Twickenham to deal with that ferocious England pack. And they probably more so than years gone by, they have the personnel in that pack to give it a right good go.
They started last year with 1 score losses to Ireland and England. They went on a 5-game win run in the middle of last year, putting together some very impressive performances, including beating France in Murrayfield. They did come crashing back to earth at the very end of the season. They had a tough loss against France, 1-score loss, and then they went and got pumped by Ireland in the final game, which you can read a lot into that game. Maybe they were just tired at the end of a long season. Maybe
potentially
they just weren't right on the day. But as it
Ireland
was,
just have the Indian sign over them at the moment,
which they do to some extent. But certainly to see that pack get blown away the way it did after the season that it had was mighty concerning for them. And just conceding, I think, 3 consecutive scores to a team that had struggled so badly in the red zone. Will have been a tough pill to swallow for Scotland, and it'll be telling to see when they come back from an attacking point of view. Obviously without Finn Russell, they scored 20 points, more than 20 points just once in 8 games against Six Nations opposition last year.
Not very effective, pretty unexceptional attack was what was categorising their season last year. Whereas it had been the super sexy flash rugby that we had seen when they were coming up.
Head coach Gregor is the attack coach.
He is.
And so
they do definitely want to implement that. It makes more sense when you have a guy like Finn who will be available this time. So hopefully you'll see marrying. What you're trying to do is marry that heft and physicality and that nous that they had in the last season to control some of these games with the element of chaos factor and tempo and just exceptional distribution to find space where others might not. That's definitely got to be Scotland's avenue to success. They need to ask questions of England that aren't just bludgeoning around the corner, which England are all too game to defend them with. They need to try and find space all over the park, widen the field, and trust Finn to get it done. Have Price or whomever set a decent tempo and get good clean ball to him. Your ball carriers do need to win clean ball and present it quickly, and you do need to avoid jackal threats and all of this. So there's many tools to go into it, but basically it's putting it in Finn's hands and trying to run lines off him and trying to get an offense going.
And that's something that with Finn and Rasting as well, they're going to have done a lot of learning even already. Like in the last week since they've been together, they're going to have been Really working hard on basically getting the outside backs in the centres to have a read off what Finn wants in the offence.
Yeah.
And hopefully the hatchet's been buried between Finn and Gregor Townsend, because it won't work if there's a rift there. Gregor's the attack coach and Finn's the guy who's going to lead the offense on the field.
The 10, indeed.
Yeah, so it's like they need to be on the same page.
As long as they didn't bury the hatchet in one of them's backs, then it should be fine,
Indeed. From a squad point of view, they're in an interesting position actually at hooker, where they're without McAnally and Fraser Brown.
Right.
So they actually have 4 hookers in the squad. George Turner is the obvious incumbent, the guy with a bit of test experience, but Ewan Ashman in Sales had a fine season. David Cherry in Edinburgh, a decent scrumming hooker.
Yeah.
Grant Stewart's the other one in there. Up in the air as to they go for. I feel like Fraser Brown's the guy they should go for, but they might go with Cherry.
Yeah.
A tight head Xander Fagerson and a loose head Rory Sutherland feels very, very solid. Brilliant scrumming.
And then
props.
even Kebbell and Bergen off the bench probably is
quality
useful,
as well.
Useful units, good scrummagers.
Willem Nell not getting into that squad because he's out scrummed, which is crazy.
Where a few years ago it was Nell was the only tight head we could look to lock down a scrum. Seemingly Scotland have an embarrassment of riches, and same is true in the second row. It's options galore. And do they stick with Cummings, who's been the incumbent, the Glasgow Warrior?
I think the
Richie
sense you're
Gray.
getting from Cummings is that he's adding a lot in the scrum,
right?
And the second rows have been there functionally as set piece men, more than anything else. They also have the 2 Gray brothers. They have Alex Craig from Gloucester. They've Grant Gilchrist from Edinburgh. No Ben Toulis left out. When Scotland were at their best with Toulis and Gilchrist in there, their second rows got through a lot of work.
Yeah.
Notably last year, their tackle stops were topped by Jamie Ritchie and Hamish Watson. Their turnover stats were topped by Ritchie and Watson. Their carrying stats, Ritchie and Watson.
Yeah.
Like, they need more playmakers in the pack. Like, England have the back rowers to cancel out Watson and Ritchie, and like, even if they have great games, they might edge that battle. They could against Currie and Billy V. They could absolutely.
Potentially.
They're as good as any of them.
But it's still going to be close.
England
to
have
wash.
Maro Itoje.
Yeah.
England have whether they go with Johnny Hill or Courtney Laws. They have playmakers. Jamie George. They've got really, really great playmakers all over that pack. If Scotland are going to live with that, they're going to need, like, the second row for me is a big call. Scott Cummins hasn't done enough for me.
Yeah.
Johnny Gray is bordering on not doing enough for me. Even though this pack played well last year, the work rate was so tilted in favour of the back row and the 2 flankers really over everybody else.
Yeah. Where we have seen Gray be the tackle machine.
I think Johnny Gray is still in there, but I think Grant Gilchrist is the guy you get in with him. I would be disappointed to see Scott Cummings. As much as you might lose something in the scrum, we've already talked about how Andrew Brace makes even a dominant scrum no guarantee.
Indeed.
So what they need is playmaking around the pitch, and I don't think Cummings gives them enough of that.
Yeah, I think I probably agree. That being said, I think I'd expect to see Cummings just because he's been the incumbent, and they've gone against my selection a few times. They indeed.
At number 8, they have a 3-way scrap between Blade Thompson, Matt Fagerson, and Gary Graham, and I believe that the tip from if Scottish media seems to be that Graham's going to get the nod.
Yeah.
The Newcastle man.
Interesting. It would be good to see some new caps, some fresh blood back there. Hopefully he goes well if he does get it.
Ali Price and Finn Russell likely in at halfback. Can't see that being disrupted. The back 3 before we get to the centres is awesome. Hopefully Doohan and Darcy Graham are good to go on the wings.
Yeah, with Stewie Hogg feeling Boyd.
Yeah, Doohan and Darcy are so great because and even Stewie Hogg, like, we've had our issues with him in defence, but all 3 of them are raw finishers.
Yeah,
they're really, really good at finishing a try if they're in space, and making
Finn's
things happen.
Put them in space,
and
or try
the key,
to
exactly. So they have men on that pitch who, if Finn finds the space, are well capable of
executing
creating
and
tries.
scoring. Yeah.
What's interesting is at centre, because when Finn Scotland have been attacking at their most fluid, really the centres have been such a key piece of the puzzle.
Yeah.
You look at that second half against England in Twickenham 2 years ago, and Sam Johnson just checking the defence, making sure, because Finn loves to throw these wide passes and England's defence is going to naturally spread out to that. So just having good, intelligent line runners to pick holes through that expanded England defence and check them and force them to respect the inside option is absolutely huge.
Yeah.
And I think Chris Harris is a shoe-in for me in terms of he does give them that. He's a
hefty,
very...
He carries well,
nice and evasive if he's given the
and
space to be.
a smart footballer as well.
Smart footballer. And then the other, like, without Sam Johnson in the squad, the other centre is an interesting one. I mean, they've Hugh Jones in the squad who's been playing at fullback, and I don't really know why he's in the squad. He can't really defend, and while he can pick a good line, I just don't really see him as a test level player.
It's harsh.
James,
Maybe harsh, but I don't know where you put him. I think because they've tried him at centre and he's too soft, and then he's not an out-and-out winger either. So it's like, where does he go?
I don't really understand Hugh Jones. I don't understand Sam Johnson not being in there. And then you're talking about James Lang, who came in last autumn, and in the opportunity he got, he wasn't impressive. Duncan Taylor has never really done it in a Scotland shirt. And then the other guy who's come in is Cameron Redpath from Bath, who's a young man, played underage with England, played 10, has played 12, is a distributor, is a nice evasive guy in the loose. He seems like the obvious option to throw straight in, except it seems crazy that they're still in this position where they're just throwing guys in. Yeah. And it is tough for
especially when they have Sam Johnson, who is their best centre.
Yeah.
I just don't understand.
Yeah.
There are a few elements to Gregor's selection that have always perplexed me. Part of it's the second row, but the centres have always been in flux.
He's never quite settled on a combination he likes, and now there's a new shiny thing in Redpath, who I think he might come in and play 12. And I actually, you do have to gamble if you're going to try and go to Twickenham and win. So I actually don't hate the call.
No, I know. And if
I'd be a lot more discouraged if I saw sort of Harris and Duncan Taylor, which I think is the incumbent combination, just because I don't think Taylor offers enough, and I think he can be roughed up badly on both sides of the ball.
He's a big lad, but he's kind of a little bit. He doesn't throw it about quite the way you'd like to. He has scored some good tries for Sarries in seasons gone by, but I don't think he's the full article. And I think a combination of him and Harris is just a little bit too blunt and bludgeoning, and I don't think they're that effective for it. I think the balance is off. I think, as I said, Sam Johnson's actually their best centre, but he's not in. So
maybe he's injured. I'll have to look that up, but I don't think he was. I didn't see that he was
just
injured.
fallen out of favour for reasons unknown.
Yeah.
But even without him, they do have the tools to try and attack this England team out wide, and they will have to, obviously.
Speaking of the offence in terms of what they have to do, they have those nice weapons. They have natural born finishers on the outside. I think clean ball and tempo are going to have to be points of emphasis for this pack. In terms of ball and
you have to win. You have to find a little bit of a soft shoulder with your carries, but you have to get clean placement, quick resourcing, and move it quickly. Because as soon as England have time to settle, or if they have a chance to disrupt you by dominating the contact zone, it's going to be tough for Finn or anybody to unlock them. Then you need to disrupt them first.
It needs good first phase play calling and execution. That's like we saw that with Ireland. There was a couple of moments in that game in I think it was Twickenham. It was last autumn when they had opportunities to open up the English defence. Now they didn't take them. Ireland are so rudimentary, they kind of just passed them by. But we highlighted it on videos that they had like a first phase hit up from Henshaw, which is quite good, and you could see Scotland doing that as well with Harris. They could even work it a little wider, get Hamish Watson around the corner. If you can get quick ball, the pack are aware of it, everyone's aware of it, they know what the play call is. Good line hit, ball is clean, round the corner, ball is clean. Third phase, England found themselves extremely narrow, and actually quite slow to get back on the open side. And with Price and Russell in there, really it's crucial that they get sort of that good rhythm going off set piece on first phase, and that's where you're looking at a guy like Chris Harris to come in off first phase, maybe pick a pass out, beat off Price or Finn, but picking a nice line. And obviously if the hole is cut, they can adjust, but for the most part you're going to be looking to get a nice sharp line off first phase. Have forwards be aware of it. If it's off line out, you're having like the likes of Richie and the likes of a second row, like a whoever it is going to be, Johnny Gray, getting over the ball, making it lightning quick, and have everybody ready for the next phase. And then if you do that with enough speed and enough tempo, you will get disruption. What you can't have happen is sort of scrappy ball off the line out, everything's slow, England are on top of you, and then once it's from a ruck situation, if you're tight towards the touchline, it's going to be very difficult to get outside that initial English rush. And most teams feel obligated to try and sit them down with carries around the ruck,
which they're more than ready to deal with.
All of a sudden Itoji's in your face, he's lashing you backwards, and then you're in box kick situation, which is not really where you want to be. So I think launching off set piece is going to be vital for Scotland here, and sitting down that defence and then moving them wide. And if you can just give Price and Finn that second quicker, where they can have the opportunity to execute good passes and get a read on an English defence which isn't as good as it has looked because it hasn't been tested in that way.
No, exactly.
That's
This is the point, and Scotland in years gone by under Gregor, early on, they were very much a team that were so full of optimism, where you could see with Finn throwing these passes, they kind of believed, even though there's nothing on here, there's a try on every phase if we just find it. Let's fire that pass out wide. And while that's like not there is potential for a try on at the start of every phase. That's true. I would like them to emphasise the third phase, as you pointed out, because the third phase is kind of where attacking rugby has gone in recent seasons. Is like, yes, you hit up in the middle off set piece, you kind of go around the corner, and then the defence isn't as set as it was on the first phase, and there is a try there for the astute and accurate team and quick team to execute on. Now, we highlighted before, Ireland had created that chance and then had no interest in executing. They went around a corner again.
They weren't even aware that they'd created it.
Yeah.
But if you can,
Scotland are not that way.
No, good carry, quick ball. Good carry, quick ball. Then there's
a try somewhere.
Then
get the ball in Finn's hands, and he has to decide where to put it, because there's a try somewhere, and that's the way they will unpick this English defence if they are to do it, is with that emphasis. I'd love to see them go for it with that gung-ho kind of nature, throw the pass if it's on when it's on, kick the kick if it's on when it's on.
The no-look short pass sometimes if England are drifting out. I mean, he has all of the tools. He has the reputation as a maverick, but he's not that. He can be loose sometimes, especially when he's behind a pack that's going backwards with the defence in his face, and he just wants to make things happen when there aren't things to be made to happen. But really, in the last couple of years, he's become a very solid 10, and he's just very, very uniquely adept at finding that space. I think I would be excited about the capacity for Finn to get in there, but it's reliant on good play calling and good clean set piece ball, which is going to be huge.
Yeah, absolutely. And then the other side of it is defending this England team.
Yeah,
I think that's huge as well. To put a fine point,
they kick it.
Yeah, well, hopefully they will kick it is kind of Scotland's first way of defending. But then when maybe they don't kick it, you do need to have some tools in your toolbox to stop them. And with a fresh centre pairing, it's going to be a big test for them to shut down what is usually a pretty dynamic axis in terms of distribution or kicking threats. So the likes of Stewie Hogg could be in for a busy afternoon in terms of dealing with the balls in behind. He'll have to manage those.
Stewie Hogg is, like, as good as he's been, he's not far from sort of last chance saloon for me. I mean, it's a crucial work on. It happened in way too many games. The hope is that he's going to be buoyed by Finn's return and feel less obliged to do everything, and that's going to free him up to focus more on his job, and he'll be less inclined to sort of mess up in those situations. Given how often the problem has reared its head for him, I don't know.
And the fact that England have gone to the attacking kick for many seasons, even into the World Cup, they were doing it. Like the kicking for Johnny May is a huge path for success for them. It's a big score generator. You marry that with the fact that Stewie has looked at as least confident and least assured when a ball is behind him and he's having to gather it, which is a tough situation for any fullback, but he's not dealt with them well of late. So there's things to be mocked up.
That's the crucial thing. Dealing with the high balls. If Hogg can deal with the high balls, England will be forced to go elsewhere. And listen, as dismissive as he's been in Scotland's chances, a lot went right for their defence last year under Steve Tandy. It was robust, it was physical, it was unyielding in a lot of cases.
They don't suffer from the same thing where they used to be on the level with Italy, where they're missing a load of tackles and things. They've been nowhere near that for seasons. They're pretty combative and competitive in tight, scrappy games, in winter rugby as it is. They're well able to.
Jamie Ritchie and Hamish Watson in last year's competition, 9 turnovers each in 5 games, combined 18 turnovers by the two flankers. And now we did make the point that they're getting through a lot of work themselves. But that's exceptional. Those two are, nearing being on track for going to the Lions tour, if not there already. They're doing a great job. They're super playmakers, and them winning their battles against the likes of Underhill, Currie, Vunipola, or Ben Earl if he's playing. That's going to be a really, really key matchup, is those guys getting on top. And then the likes of Johnny Gray needs to, put his body in, make tackles, make sure that there's no cheeky meters to be made in and around the ruck, and that England are going to have to work for everything. The evidence of last season suggesting England will just huff the ball in the sky, if that's the case, in which case you deal with that. Although my suspicion would be that they are going to try and probe in the midfield.
Yeah,
They are going to test
I'd
whatever
say we'll see a little bit more of
Yeah.
ball in hand. And if you're preparing from Scotland's point of view, you have to expect England to try and run at you and try and test you in some of these areas and be ready to refute it. Because one point of major concern was just in terms of what Ireland did to them at the end of last season.
Right.
Ireland, a team that like as much as England were kicking the leather off the ball and not really going to the attack, they at least had a lot of defensive or attacking credentials to lean on, and they can score some pretty tries. Ireland had been very rudimentary on offense for many years, including last year.
We patented the kick the ball in the air when there's nothing on.
Yeah, indeed. And then just also the pick and jam when you're in the red zone, universally, like one pass or no pass plays, universally, very rudimentary attack, not much to write home about, and yet they broke them.
It was a sequence either side of half time when they had a 9-6 lead, I believe, going into it. Where they conceded. First of all, they gave up the red zone possessions 3 in a row and conceded tries and 3 in a row red zone possessions for Ireland.
Yeah, that's the losing of the game
really,
right there.
Without laying a glove on them, without making a play, it happened in quick succession. It was efficient enough from Ireland. Like Ireland were owning the contacts. But man, it was so easy.
Yeah, too easy.
Yeah,
that's
like
the
Daragh
concern.
was picking a line and just going right through. The next one was a dominant carry. The next one was a dominant carry. And Ireland did a good job of latching and resourcing their attackers, and Scotland just didn't have an answer. And so,
and England will go to the latch. They do that very often. And instead of Daragh, it's going to be Vunipola, and instead of Ryan, it's going to be Itoje. And it's like the task is huge, and you can't be that.
No, there needs to be more
area.
playmaking, and it's really on first of all, it's obviously on Richie and Watson to be as good as they have been.
It's on the locks to do more work.
It's on the locks and the props, and I know the props are there to scrummage, but they can't be just. They have to make the 13 players on the pitch not named Watson and Richie are going to have to come up with some defensive plays if they're going to contain England.
Yes, it's true.
Yeah, and the other area is discipline as well. Obviously, it's going to be so important that the set piece is right. So important that they don't let England disrupt them at line out, and they do sort of, at the very least, establish themselves in the scrum as being solid and presenting clean ball to their attack and not giving away penalties and really ideally putting pressure.
Putting pressure on England's feet as well. You'd like to see. I think both sides will be scrummaging to try and apply pressure. It could be a dynamic scrum battle, whether it's officiated right or not. It remains to be seen. But Scotland definitely have avenues to success. They have bits of confidence because they've come here and performed before. It is a tough task. It is Twickenham. They are definitely not favourites, and they probably aren't in their own minds either. But they should be coming in gung ho for this challenge and hoping, should they win this game, then they're in a phenomenal position going forward and get with some momentum. And you never know.
It was important to them last year as well that they stayed in the game against Ireland. And they lost it by a score, and they stayed in the game against England and they lost it by a score. And while that was a negative start to the season for them in some ways, in some respects they did take confidence from it in a way that they mightn't have if they were blown away.
Indeed,
but they were in those games. They were physical. They were holding fast with their pack, and then one error from Hogg and it was gone. Really, in both cases, one error from Hogg and it was gone. What they need, what they need is to compete here with England, regardless of win or not. Obviously, listen, they have a great record against England. Finn has a phenomenal record against England. They always seem to cause them problems. It's never a blowout recently. It looked like it was going to be one when they were 31-0 down, but then they came right back in it.
Indeed.
So I mean, it's certainly they're not going to go in with any fear, but they do need to not be blown away. They do need to make plays on defence and not let England get on top of them. And if they do that, I think they are in a good position, as they were last year, to kick on and establish themselves.
And
to
probably
try
with Finn back in as he wasn't, if they're in a
Listen,
tight one, if
they've
they're in a
got Ireland
6-point game, they're much more likely to find a score with Finn on the pitch than they are without him. So,
and they've got a game against Ireland in Murrayfield this year. I believe they have Wales in Murrayfield this year. They're going to be confident about disrupting that, and Ireland is the one they really want to put away. So just not getting blown away and not having a knock taken to that confidence, especially after the last time out against Ireland, is so vital for Scotland.
With that, how do you think it's going to play out?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think that it's going to be a blowout. I don't think so. It hasn't been in years gone past. So I do think that England will find something on offence, as Ireland did against the Scots. So this is probably ludicrously optimistic. I mean, we're going to be looking at a 16-9 game and laughing at my silly prediction. But I actually was thinking like both sides to score tries and maybe something to happen. Like Scotland, maybe a couple of tries. Maybe what's that? 12 points out of 3-pointer, 15 points for Scotland. England double it, 30 to 15 maybe. Maybe 27 to 15 if Scotland don't concede that late penalty.
Yes, maybe. Yeah, that's probably about the split, I guess. I'd probably
I don't know
make
if
it more
Scotland are
likely
going to
to be.
step up to England's attack. I think England are going to find it. That's my fear.
I'm looking more like 20 points to 9 or 20-11 kind of thing. A 2-score game, a low scoring kind of scuttery February Six Nations-y game, but also England kind of dominant without being as clinical as they might have been, but with one good try in there. That's probably what.
No tries for Scotland.
No.
Let's get a try, Scotland. Let's go.
Let's
get out there and get a try.
Hopefully so.
Boys.
But yeah,
send Proud Edward's army home to think again.
Indeed. Okay, with that we will move on. And so we arrive then at the final game of this opening weekend of Six Nations action. It's good to be able to say that again. But this takes place on Sunday, and it is between Wales and Ireland as well. Probably the marquee fixture of the weekend in terms of these are two great rivals. Yep. And yeah, I would think so.
Interesting, because Scotland finished above Wales and England finished above Ireland.
I know, yeah, but I'm just thinking in terms of the ongoing battle that is this fixture, and the fact that it's been topsy-turvy over the last wee while, and Wales coming off a pretty horrendous year, Ireland in transition. It would be nice to see, with the roof closed in the Millennium Stadium, or in whatever it is, the Principality Stadium now, and with Wayne, the best in the business, Barnes reffing, it could be a wonderful game of rugby, to be honest.
Has potential. Kicks off at 3 o'clock on Sunday, as you say, GMT local time. And yeah, it is. I suppose you could bill it as 2018 Grand Slam champions, 2019 Grand Slam champions, last two non-English teams to win the Six Nations, going at it. They have had some great games over the years.
They have. They know each other very well. Play domestic rugby together in terms of Pro 14 rivals. A lot of inside knowledge on both. It's it's a game that's not shy of colour at all. And just in terms of the colour of the game, we'll start with Wales, who are the hosts, as we have been doing. We're going to look at the broad things going into this tournament, what both sides are looking to get out of it, what the situation with their squad is, and I suppose then just the game itself comes as a secondary thing, because we're kind of looking on the macro first.
Although in this instance, curiously, this game does feel vitally important for both teams in a way, even that the other games aren't necessarily. Obviously, if France or England lose to Italy or Scotland, that'll be bad for them. Yes. But in terms of the macro picture, actually, this game will be front and centre in the minds of both Wales and Ireland as a very necessary one.
You can't. The adage is you can't win the Six Nations in the first weekend, but you can damn sure lose it, and that'll definitely feel prevalent in the minds of these two.
The stakes are high. We talk about this Six Nations as being sort of a diet Six Nations without fans. It's a maybe a Lions year, but maybe not a Lions year at the moment. And there isn't a World Cup around the corner. They're very much in the building stage. But for these two teams, with both coaches running out of their contracts at the end of the year and both having sort of stuttering year, it feels vitally important that they have a good Six Nations, and with both of them still having England and France to play after this.
If they are to have a good tough. Six Nations, it involves winning this game, and that's true for both of them.
And like we're starting with Wales, as you say. From their point of view, I mean, to say they had it rough last season is to underestimate it. I mean, they played, I think, 10 games, 7 defeats, 3 victories. The 3 victories, 2 over Italy and a stuttering win over Georgia, and every game against top quality opposition, tier 1 opposition, was a defeat. I mean, staggering considering
they came from World Cup semi-finalists and a robust defence with wily game playmakers and a coaching ticket that was there for over a decade, and one of the most settled and teams, and with all the nous and all the plays. They went from that to an absolute basket case in a matter of months, and it was really shocking to behold, and it was very concerning for the Welsh who were watching as well. But
one of the interesting comments I read from a journalist, someone who was talking to the Welsh coaches after the South Africa game at the World Cup, it was like, I can't remember the exact phraseology that they used. I'm not sure if it was Gatland or someone else on the staff, was saying they don't really have any regrets as a group, that they've wrung out this sort of sponge of this Welsh squad and got every bit of moisture out of it that we could.
Yeah.
And maybe what Pivac has been left with is the sort of shriveled,
dead sponge.
Yeah, to try and
kind of one that's
get
been
the job done
at the bottom of the sink for the last 6 months.
Yeah,
we should really throw that out.
It seems harsh, but like certainly coming off of that, going into this season, it feels vital that they find at least some sort of identity and decide what type of team they want to be. I mean, one of the things that characterises this team on both attack and defence is non-committal to any kind of style, being very disjointed, leaving space where there shouldn't be space around the rucks, not attacking when they should attack, not kicking when they should kick,
not executing in a line as a unit. Rather, one person's shooting, the other person's drifting, and it's like, what are we doing here, boys?
Disjointed is a generous word for it, but it has been just messy, and likewise at the set piece, a bit lost, especially at the scrum. Really, really struggling against improving scrums. But it was actually a tale of the last time these two met in the Autumn Nations Cup. The Irish scrum dismantled
bullied
them.
them,
Carey hauled off after 40 minutes.
And it was a scrum. It was an Irish scrum without the freshly returned furlong as well. So it's definitely that'll be a point of concern for them. They need to get parity. Is normally what Welsh sides of the past have gone for against scrums that fancy it is locking it down and making it not about that. That's something they will have to rediscover about themselves, just how to be awkward. And they are at home and they are under the roof, and they are a very tough task for anyone in the Millennium Stadium, and that has to be the case for them. It has to be an improved showing from what they had last year.
Listen, from the point of view of the squads, it's not all doom and gloom. I mean, I was looking at the side that did play that semi-final against the Springboks and pushed them all the way, nearly got to a World Cup final, just lost to the Springboks, and certainly gave them a bigger test than the England side did in the final. That side, 13 of the starting 15 are in this squad, 19 of the starting 23. There's a lot of playmaking talent. On top of that, you have Faletau coming back in, Dan Leadiot coming back in, who's in great form. They will have Liam Williams. They won't have him this week, unfortunately.
He's suspended, isn't he?
I believe so. That's whatever he did. I actually can't remember what he did, if he did something bad, but it wouldn't be out of character for him to be just suspended, I guess.
Yes.
He is missing this week. They'll have him going forward. But certainly in terms of the strengths of the squad, there's a lot there to work with. Crucially, the returns of Ken Owens as well, who wasn't a huge leader for them. If it wasn't for Alan Wynne-Jones, he'd be a shoe-in for captain.
He is kind of deputy captain to Alan Wynne-Jones. He's just a big factor of, are we a wily, wise pack, or are we a bit of a rudderless pack with an Alan Wynne-Jones?
Yeah,
he can be a difference maker in that.
He's all about solidity at set piece, I guess. He's not really a set piece man, but he is about sort of locking it down, and he rarely gets schooled in that area one way or another, either at line out throwing or at scrummaging. What he brings is just a brilliant footballing ability, a brilliant ability to break down, playmaker, great
good
hands.
Passer,
he's like another Tipperick, or another, like maybe not as versatile as Tipperick, but he's a super player.
No, he has shades of Dane Coles about him when he's out in the wide channels. He's obviously not quite as silky or as quick as Dane Coles, but he does have that recognition of space and that ability to go for a pass. And certainly the Welsh tradition in terms of rugby is to attack the space and to try and recognise tries, and their club sides do that. Now, their club sides have been struggling for all kinds of reasons, but they can still execute a try when it's on sometimes, which is an encouraging thing, especially for Pivac, who's wanted to see them play with a bit more tempo. We've seen at times in the last season, even in their losing efforts, that what he was trying to do, and we've seen them transition very, very quickly. Saw them score a great try against England off the kickoff on the second half, just 2 passes and then suddenly they're away. So it would be nice to see that kind of dangerous quality to Wales. Obviously not too nice from an Irish point of view, but that's definitely what they want to try and marry with a bit more solidity and a bit more robustness.
And Ken Owens just goes a long way to doing both.
He does.
So in terms of the squad that they're going to go for, I feel like the likes of Rhys Carey aren't an option. Wynne-Jones, the best scrumming loose head. They don't really have the luxury of options.
No, they don't. They
Wynne-Jones
are struggling
is the guy
props.
who can do it, who can lock down the scrum, keep him in there. I think likewise Thomas Francis, who did not have a good autumn campaign, still their best scrummaging tight head. I know they have
Samson Lee. Is he about?
Samson Lee's not about. I think they have Leon Brown and who else? Dylan Lewis in there. Dylan Lewis could get the nod, but I would err on the side of Thomas Francis for sure. I think Ken Owens has to come straight into the starting team. He's fit, he's ready to go.
He's a great player.
He's played
they do have Elliot Dee and Ryan Elias have kind of traded the jersey over the last wee while, and none of them very convincingly.
No.
Yeah.
So I think he has to come back in. Alan Wynne-Jones to be partnered by, I would say, one of Adam Beard or Jake Ball. Jake Ball's the incumbent. Beard has been playing well at Pro 14 level. I don't see a way back in for Will Rowlands after his autumn form.
He was very poor in the autumn, and he had been good for Wasps, and he got in on the foot of his good form for Wasps, but no, it wasn't good enough. And even I watched a Wasps game at the weekend, and the Launchbury's out of it, and there they were getting pumped by I can't even remember who, but it was Harlequins. Yeah, were getting pumped, and Rowlands was all over the shop, and he was there as well and missing. It was like, that's not the complete article at all. Yeah,
and likewise, Corey Hill, I don't think is quite as good as the other two. I think Ball and the incumbent, they could do worse. Good scrumming lock, good hustle man, great partner, Alan Wynne-Jones.
Yeah,
Adam Beard is the other option who they might go with.
Yeah,
the back row is where it gets really interesting. Like Dan Lydiot has been Ireland kryptonite in times gone by.
Yeah,
he's in great form. He's coming back. He doesn't have any of this baggage that the current Welsh side are, and he does a lot of the dirty work. He does a lot of the tackling. He gets on top. He frees up space and time for the likes of Falatau and Tipperick, who might make the other two.
You want to get out in the wide channels on the ball.
Yeah, I would be very surprised if he didn't go with Dan Lydiot here. I know Aaron Wainwright's an incumbent. I think they're kind of looking at Wainwright as a potential backup number 8, especially when Falatau is as injury prone as he has been, and also getting on as well.
Yeah.
So I think they will go with Lydiot, Tipperick and Falatau as a back row that has caused Ireland problems as a unit.
Yes,
obviously with Warburton in tow in times gone by, they have derailed slow Irish attacks brilliantly, with Lydiot doing the tackling and the other guys doing the jackling, and again that could be the picture today, so I'd be very surprised to see them go with anything else. Obviously Navidi is in the mix as well, but I wouldn't go with Navidi against Ireland.
Probably not. It's not the right again, horses for courses. You kind of want a tackle machine who's going to make those tight exchanges very difficult for Ireland, because that's probably where they're going to attack them.
Yeah.
And then in terms of the halfbacks, there are always options at scrummy for them. They have lots of scrummies. Gareth Davis, Williams and Hardy, all kind of similar mould of players. To be honest, all the Welsh scrummies are very similar moulded players. They try and set a high tempo. They're pretty frenetic, combative, can be good, can be bad at times.
It's key. It's vital, as we said with Italy, whoever they go with there, it's vital that they don't lean on them as a kicking option, because they're not kicking scrum halves.
Yeah.
It's not what makes them great. Bigger is a great kicker in the air. He's a guy who can make things happen. Those guys aren't, and I don't really mind who they go with there. It just needs to be about, as you say, the tempo, and their pack need to do them favours by picking good lines and getting over the ball and giving them good tempo. And if they do that, those guys can make good things happen in attack, and they can get a really lovely flow going. Especially Gareth Davis. I mean,
he's my favourite.
He was in our team of the Rugby World Cup.
Yes, he was phenomenal in the World Cup. He showed everything that a Welsh scrum half should be about, which was like prickly and combative, but also quick, lightning quick in terms of thought and action. So I would be surprised to see them go with anyone else other than Gareth Davies, but I not wholly surprised. They could go with Williams or even Hardy. They've done so before. What I would be surprised is if they opted away from Dan Biggar. They have Jared Evans and they have Callum Sheedy in there, but as is the case with Sexton, and there are loads of people in Ireland calling for Sexton. He's too old. He's not going to the next World Cup, so you need to drop him. But it's like you look at the options in behind, and it's like these guys aren't test level. The only test level guy we have is Johnny Sexton. Likewise for Wales, it's Dan Biggar. Dan Biggar is the man for them.
Dan Biggar is not on the way out.
No, he's not.
I watched him the other week for Northampton. He's playing great rugby.
He's playing phenomenal stuff.
And he's a little between the legs passes. His distribution was awesome. He was throwing nice skip balls. He obviously, we know he has this great aerial ability, this great kicking ability, this wonderful test match clutch where you really get the sense that he's fighting for the jersey.
We've seen that for Ospreys in years gone by. He's done it in the RDS, kicking like touchline goal line or touchline conversions and stuff.
When the game is going away from Wales, even last year against England, their best showing in the Autumn Nations Cup against England, Dan Biggar was at the heart of it. You know, he was blocking those little kicks that England were trying to put him behind, chasing the ball. He was just being a nuisance, and while it wasn't enough to win the game, he really did show why he's the best 10. He's not out of the picture for Lions 10.
No, he's not.
He's not in my head.
He's very much in the picture for Lions 10 in my mind as well. So yeah, I'd be surprised if they opted for anyone other than the man Dan Biggar. And then they have decisions to make in the centre. Obviously they have Johnny Williams and Owen Watkin as options at 12. They'll probably go for Jonathan Davis.
Jonathan Davis will play 13.
13.
Nick Tompkins feels like a failed experiment.
It does, and he's just been a little bit soft. He is still in there, so he's still young as well, so there's potential for us to see him too. What's really exciting though is out wide you have established guys like Josh Adams, obviously no Liam Williams, Bob and Diffuser, but Lee Halfpenny we've seen many times before as well. And then on the other wing you have a choice between your stalwart George North or your flyer Louis Rees-Zammit, the Gloucester speedster. All good options, to be honest. You can make a pretty coherent and cohesive back three.
North's form is okay. It's hard to know. They go with Halfpenny at halfback, Josh Adams on one wing, and as you say, North or Louis Rees-Zammit on the other, and the other one of those on the bench. So I think it's as you say, it's horses for courses. I wouldn't mind seeing Louis Rees-Zammit, but maybe this isn't the game for him.
Maybe not. Well, you're expecting Ireland to kick a lot to you, so they'll probably have someone who's a bit more vertically capable of dealing with it, and that would be George North. There's in terms of the squad, there is definitely causes for optimism throughout. Potential for attacking rugby. Want to see a bit more cohesion. Good to see leaders like Ken Owens coming back. But the main point for Wales is just they need to be better than last year. It's a low enough bar that they've set themselves with last year.
Well, I don't think that'll be enough. I don't think that'll be enough. I don't think 4 wins out of 8 is going to be enough to save Pivac. I think Pivac they need
to win this game.
They probably need to win this game. I don't see Pivac taking them to the World Cup if they don't win this game, which is a shame because Pivac, his roots as a former Fiji coach and a former Scarlets coach, a guy from New Zealand.
Yeah, plays some beautiful rugby.
His roots are about good rugby, and it sometimes takes a while for him to be in charge of a team and for that to take hold.
Yeah.
Last season it seemed like they never really committed to it.
No.
In the way that they were always very reactive, they were always losing games, they were always kind of stopping the bleeding, and as such they kind of wilted to the pressure and just said the done thing here is to just kick the ball and we'll try and do that and we still have bigger, but they did that without really having the same defensive pressure.
No.
They had this bizarre little their defense was kind of all over the place.
It was
Nick Tompkins as 13 as the key defender was out of his depth as a young man.
Even a few times with Jonathan Davis, it looked like the system was completely changed, and none of them were leading any of it.
It wasn't aggressive. It wasn't. There was
one in the Six Nations against Ireland actually. This fixture this last year, where Ireland managed to create what should have been a try, but Ireland failed to execute in the first 2 minutes, and it was off first phase, and Johnny Sexton just did a little shaped to loop and just ran through a hole that should not have been there, but the two centres, one of them had drifted off and the other one shot out, and then there was just a big hole for Sexton to drop through.
There's all kinds
what's
of
going on here?
Attempted playmaking and not enough sort of cohesion going on there. They've also left huge space in the ruck. Every time someone gets a bit of momentum against them, nobody seems sure what to do, and then all of a sudden 2 guys go into jackal in their space, and it definitely seems like it's lacking in coherence. But they want to be an offensive team. That's Pivac's roots. They got to commit to it, and while it's a defensive game at the moment, I really do think their best moments period came from just these chaos opportunities where they showed that they have the skill set, they have the players to make things happen and attack.
Tipperick scored that try against England, the kick return. It was the first
right
play
after half time.
The first play of the second half, kicked. It was Tompkins who caught it, offloaded. They broke down the right hand side and went up under the posts for a lovely coast to coast score. And that's got to be the picture for Wales, and against a team like Ireland who are probably going to hold the ball a bit, kick it in the air, try and smother, try and make it slow. The way Wales have countered that is by being the team that can quickly click into transition and score, and punish Ireland for not being clinical enough by being clinical themselves.
Yes, indeed. And the opposite of that happened the last time they played. I was watching that game between Ireland and Wales in the Autumn Nations Cup, and they Wales kicked poorly. They kicked from the base of the ruck. Gareth Davis was doing a lot of the kicking. That cost them. That I hate to see. But they had a few occasions, 3 occasions where they got a chance to attack, and on all 3 occasions, every ruck without exception was being tortured by the Irish jacklers. They would get a decent carry, and all of a sudden it was O'Mahony, and then there was 2 Welshmen in trying to get him out of there, and then the ball was slow again, and then they went slow again, and then all of a sudden Stander was in, and it was disruptive. And you're going to see that again from Ireland. It worked. I mean, on those 3 occasions they got in, Ireland did concede penalties. Wales kicked 3 points, which turned out to be bad game management because they never really got another chance and they lost 32-9.
Yeah.
But from a Welsh point of view, it needs just that little bit more structure where players need to know where the ball is going. It's as we said with Scotland, and it's going to be a theme when we talk about attacking offset piece in those first few phases. If you find yourself with a line out or a scrum in opposition territory, you need to have a plan in those 2 phases, and you need to be able to clear the ruck and get quick ball. And that, like, good carrying, picking a nice line, finding a soft spot in the defence, that's great. And then the ball needs to be quick. The scrum half needs to be there, it needs to be gone, and it gets easier when you do that. It gets easier to find fractures, and it gets harder on the defence. The quicker you manage to execute that, and the better you manage to execute it. And from a Welsh point of view, like the likes of Lydiot, the likes of Alan Wynne-Jones, they need to be making sure that O'Mahony and the boys get nowhere near their ball, because it was way too soft. It was way too easy for Ireland to get in on top.
And it wasn't just Ireland. It is Ireland this week, so that's kind of the good one thing. But it was every top opposition that they came across last year. They were too sloppy on their own ball, sloppy on defence, just not
kicking game, not the same.
Like none of it was accurate enough to win any games. So like it just needs to be tighter all round. But then particularly on offence, they need to be quick enough to punish Ireland, who will likely be slow enough to score the points that they do get in this game, and there will be chances there for Wales if they can set that tempo and commit to being the attacking, flowing side that Pivac wants them to be.
And it's about scores from deep as well. Like all teams, Ireland are tough on the red zone these days, and they're quite miserly when it comes to conceding when they're 5 out from their line.
But they could concede when you're 40 out.
That's the key, and that's like France exposed that, England exposed that with the Johnny May try from deep, and all those French tries that they scored in Paris. They just got outside Ireland. They managed to execute off chaos plays, off kick return. And what happens is Ireland actually, when there hasn't been a ruck for 10 seconds, Ireland get rudderless and they get sluggish and they seem very slow to react. And so Wales keeping the ball alive, keeping the tempo high. Ireland tend not to live with those kind of paced games. They like a slower, more controlled pace, and Wales need to speed it up.
Yeah, well,
they got the roof
down. Exactly.
They've got indoor conditions. Indeed. There's no weather here hampering them. There's no excuse. They have to attack.
They must. They need to be just far more accurate in terms of what they're bringing to it. And then I suppose when defending Ireland as well, as we said, they're without Sean Edwards, which is a huge loss for any defensive team, and their loss is France's gain, as we were alluding to. But you were talking about Lydiot returning. That could just refocus the minds on what to do to stop Ireland. Chop, poach, slow, and then they will kick to you, and then you're looking to execute off kick return and transition. That's the recipe for a good game defensively for them.
Ireland were able to find seams up front against them, which gave them the confidence. I mean, it gets very, very tough for Ireland if they can't.
No, if James Ryan gets chopped behind the gain line on the first phase, Ireland are kicking in the next 2 phases.
There's a lot of talk about how crucial Sexton is to Ireland's attack, and it is true, but all of it comes after a good carry off 9. And if you can take away the positive carries off 9 from Ireland, they tend to have nothing. I mean, there's no evidence to suggest they'll have anything this time either. That's got to be the focus. And you're talking about chop tackles, you're talking about getting the hands in, being as disruptive to their ball as they were to yours last time out. That's cool. I mean, from a structure point of view, I mean, the Irish Challenge is the perfect opportunity to be disciplined. I mean, they play off 9, they draw penalties, they kick chaos balls. The back 3 has a huge job for sure.
They do. Whoever they opt for in that combination, the back 3 and a combination of Dan Biggar as well, need to be establishing that pendulum ready for the high balls that are inevitably coming their way.
No question. But just in terms of stopping the multi-phase, I would be daring them to go wide. I mean, obviously we say this as Ireland fans, but we're watching it. They can't do it. They really can't. They can't go wide. If you want Ireland, if you want to give Ireland any space at all, give them space outside the 13 channel, because watching the Irish centres try to get it there is painful.
It is.
And you just have one guy try and shoot up. I would say the narrower the better. Dare them to do it. Have a block of players either side of the ruck coming flying forward, meaning they cannot carry around the ruck, and watch them. What Ireland are going to try and do in that context, 9 times out of 10, Sexton's going to try a crossfield kick, and then it's on your individuals in the back 3 who you do trust, your half pennies,
Josh Adams or someone.
That's where you have to win those balls, and that's how Ireland will try and get at you. But honestly, I would just dare them. Do not let them get the leg up on the inside around the rucks. Don't let them take those meters off you. Don't let them get a head of steam up. Just stop them at source and dare them to do anything else, and they won't. They'll kick it.
They won't. I know. It's depressing for me to think, because I'm an Irish fan, and I'm a fan of good, quick, flowing rugby. I think the game is about attacking the space, not running into the jerseys all the time. And yet I watch my national side run into the jerseys all the time. And I also think, we've said it before, there's no worse passing team in Tier 1 than Ireland, and there are many better passing teams in Tier 2 than Ireland too. It's true right now. They just are terrible at passing the ball.
Sexton, it gets very, very sloppy now. Hopefully, from an Ireland point of view, and we'll touch on Ireland in a moment, ringrose will be an antidote to that to some extent. But from a Welsh point of view, I would say just dare them to do it and make your tackles and be aggressive. And Ken Owens adding that nous at the breakdown should be huge. The scrum is also massive. They
can't afford a repeat of what happened in autumn to their scrum. They need to lock it down. They need to lock it down at least some of the time. Even if it's 1 or 2 scrum penalties, but not loads of them, because it was too much. No team can win. No team can win when a scrum's getting demolished as it was. So that needs to be.
And that's on the likes of Wyn Jones and Thomas Francis to make that happen.
And then if Ken Owens is back in and Alan Wyn Jones is in, I'd have no fears for their line out. I'd probably have fears for Ireland's line out, in fact, more so.
Indeed, especially considering how they struggled last year. But to move on from Wales and to look ahead to, at long last, the 6th team we'll talk about today ahead of this Six Nations 2021 is Ireland. They're playing away from home. It was kind of interesting from an Ireland point of view. I mean, you could say it feels make or break from Ireland. They're not quite in the same position that Wales are, where they're they've fallen off a cliff.
It's also an away game for Ireland, so there's more context to it than that. It's not it's not quite as important, although it is vital in terms of their Six Nations aspirations for this season. It's not quite as make or break as it is for PVAC, or for Farrell as it is for PVAC. That being said, they could do it winning this game.
They're treading water. It's been an interesting year. They did establish themselves as sort of the best of the rest with some good wins. They beat Wales. They put Scotland to the sword at the end of last season.
That was very encouraging.
Established themselves very much ahead of those teams without ever threatening to be on the level of England and France and in those games.
And by extension, Australia and New Zealand and even Argentina that we were watching at the same time.
Indeed, they're experiencing an identity crisis of sorts. I mean, based on last season, there's a lot of talk of them being a team in transition, but it's kind of hard to know what they're transitioning from or what they're transitioning to. Their best performances of last year all felt like imitations of the 2018 side. They all felt like they were edging the physical battle. They were playing a lot off 9. They were kicking effectively. They were drawing penalties. They were going to the corner, scoring bludgeoning tries from the red zone. And then, is that the plan? That seems to be the plan. When it goes well, everyone's happy. So if that's the plan, if that's the plan, can it be effective? How can it be effective against the top sides? Or are Ireland needing to add strings to their bow? Are they needing to add layers? Or are they needing to completely change the way they approach games? Because that doesn't seem to be on the agenda. Well, it's hard to know, really.
It is tough to know. They definitely need to add strings to their bow. Whether that involves wholesale change at the coaching level remains to be seen. Obviously they've recruited Paul O'Connell, which is a huge acquisition for them. I think it's probably the best move Farrell has made since his tenure, starting his tenure. Getting the line-out was a mess last year. We have a load of good young locks. You have James Ryan. You have even Henderson's not that young anymore, but he's not as used to calling the line-outs when Dev was there for so many Dev Toner for so many years. You have guys like Ryan Baird now making his way into the squad, who's an exciting young talent. Lots of good hustling young athletes at lock, but very little nous. And compared to when you have an Alan Wyn Jones on the other side of the line out to you need a bit of nous, and having Paulie in the dressing room is definitely a good addition for them. But as far as scoring, we mentioned it in the Wales thing that they're the worst passing team in Tier 1. It's very true. It's painful to watch them try and execute when, as we highlighted last year against England, they went 2 perfect phases and they had a try there to be scored if they recognised it, but they just don't seem to be looking for space. They seem to be looking to do their two hit-up plays and then we kick here. And it's that's not rugby, lads. That's not how you play properly. Indeed, and it's never going to work.
Andy Farrell did a lot of talk about heads of rugby, and then what you witnessed on the field was something that at least looked extremely prescriptive. So it's hard to know what's going on there. Listen, from a colour point of view, going into the season, the calendar stacks up nicely enough. They don't have an early fixture against England on this occasion. They play them on the last weekend. they have this make or break couple of weeks here where they're away to Wales, followed by a home game against France, and France haven't won in Dublin since 2011, as we'll touch on next week, and it's a big point for France, but they might have felt that they put their Irish demons to bed last year, which they comprehensively did in some ways.
Yeah.
But going to Dublin's going to be tough, and if Ireland get a win here and a win next week,
momentum
however
is a
they go
key
about
thing.
it, they're odds on to be going for a Grand Slam when they play England at home on the last weekend, which is in some ways crazy to think because of how far away from the top level they seem. But these are fine margins at test level.
It is fine margins, and there are points of optimism for Ireland. More so even than Wales or Scotland, in the fact that their domestic teams are playing very well in their domestic competition. They are producing a lot more talent than we used to, in terms of there is now a whole conveyor belt of really good young players coming out of Ireland and coming through the Irish system. So they're not that far off in terms of they have loads of quality players, but the identity of the team, the national team, has been kind of wrong for quite a while. And as you said, are we transitioning from something or to something? Because what the performances last year looked a little bit like Schmidt, as I said before, Schmidt ball without Schmidt brain there. So you don't have Joe Schmidt there, but you're trying to do sort of the same thing, and you're a bit less clever, a bit less subtle, and it's just very tough to do that on a sustained thing. You can get away with it against Scotland, but you're going to lose the next week. And it's a consistent problem for Ireland, is that if you're going to play that style, it was something that was cited going into the World Cup when they were just going through many, many phases. And it's as much as you're wearing your opposition down by doing that, you're wearing yourself down as well. And you need to have a style of play that allows you to score different kinds of tries. I was bemoaning the fact, and I'm still waiting for it, because a kick return try from Ireland on the first phase, it hasn't happened in years. I can't remember one. One did happen last year, but it was scrubbed off for a crossing call that was dubious enough, which is a separate issue. But it was we still haven't actually scored that kick return try. All of our tries tend to look the same. You need to have different pictures to your tries. They can't just all be crashing over from a maul from 5 meters.
They score a lot from the red zone, but it's like I say, Ireland over the last couple of years have been a very simple team to prepare for.
Indeed.
Not always a simple team to deal with, but a lot of the time proving for the top teams to be that way. They are everyone knows what's coming, and everyone knows how to deal with it, and it's just a question of executing, not giving them the entrances to the red zone, not giving them cheap penalties, and not allowing them to get any go forward. And when that happens, generally speaking, they end up dealing with it, dealing with their threats pretty well. So from a squad point of view, though, from Ireland, just to pivot on, it's much the same. Tadhg Furlong returns to the fray, but it's much the same as it was last year. There's not a huge injection of youth. Although Caelan Daragh, who had come into the team last year, is now out. He actually has concussion symptoms, which is an alarming enough one. So
concerning for a young number 8.
I would feel like in that context, where a guy shows up with concussion symptoms without a diagnosed concussion, the protocols still give me the heebie-jeebies when you're reading about all this stuff with the Stephen Thompson stuff in the lawsuit and all of these early onset dementia things. I mean, a lot of the people who are talking about concussion and talking about it from the point of view of player safety want to go back to a 3 weeks out kind of deal. I wouldn't mind seeing a young guy like Daragh with these showing up with these symptoms parked for at least 3 weeks, and that's 3 weeks if he shows nothing else. If he's healthy for 3 weeks.
I'd agree with that.
So I think
the 6 day thing is absolute total hodgepodge. It's nonsense.
They need to put Daragh out of their minds and let him be healthy as well. He's too young a guy as well.
He's a prospect for the next World Cup. The idea is him going to the next World Cup. This isn't the be all and end all. Although it is Six Nations, as we said, it's not as important as a World Cup, and it's important to keep these players safe and obviously, not do damage to him. But in his stead comes another young talent, Ryan Baird, who I'd mentioned before, who's in, and Gavin Coombs as well, another guy.
Quinn Rue's also out with a neck injury. So there's that injection of youth, but by and large, the squad is going to pick itself. Interestingly enough, just 2 loose heads in Ireland's squad, despite picking quite a big squad.
That's odd. That's odd.
It is, because they have to be bubbled. So one suspects, especially when you consider the profile of the 2 loose heads in question, Cian Healy, sort of very much getting on and an aging force and struggling to get through games at times, and then Dave Kilcoyne just coming off a long-term injury. If either of those guys drops out, I guess they're going to be looking at moving Porter again to loosehead.
I don't love it as an option.
No, neither do I.
Especially when you have guys like Cronin and other guys in Munster who can scrummage.
Yeah, no idea what they did.
Byrne and Dooley or someone from Leinster. There are good scrummaging props at loosehead in Ireland who aren't
5 locks and 2 looseheads just doesn't seem to make sense.
No, and the many centres as well. The many centres and none of them Frawley is a concern.
Frawley is a guy you would love to see in there. But yeah, the squad is gonna. It almost picks itself at this stage. Healy's going to get the nod at Loosehead. Herring. I would love to see Furlong after last week go straight back into start. I wonder if they'll do it. It'll be Porter or Furlong, one or the other.
I wouldn't mind launching Ty Furlong off the bench either, to be honest, because he could slingshot him into a tight game and he could make all the difference in the world. Especially if he's like he played phenomenally well for 40 minutes for Leinster last week. Looked all over, like doing his at his best. He was monstering scrums. The opponent Loosehead went off after 30 minutes because he was broken up from tight scrummaging, and he was making plays all around the pitch. So yeah,
he did look great.
He was a monster. Great. He at his best,
certainly too big for that level.
Oh, indeed, yeah. But at his best, he's one of the best loose or tight heads in the world, if not the best. On his day, he's phenomenal. So yeah, either or.
I wouldn't mind seeing Big Ty coming in anyway, one way or t'other. What's interesting is how badly this Daragh injury disrupts what the plan is for everything else.
Yeah.
Like the second row, they're going to be looking at Ty Byrne, who's been in good form, who I've never personally thought is big enough to play second row at test level, and not even big enough, just physical enough. It's such a tough position these days, and it really is one of those positions where you end up against your opposite man more often than not.
You do.
Like you're going to be facing down the likes of Itoje, Etzebeth, and for me, Ty Byrne just doesn't front up in that way. He's not physical enough. He's more of a back row forward.
Yeah.
Which is why what I'd love to see in the absence of Caelan Daragh is for them to stick with the plan, which would have been to move CJ from 8 to 6, because he's not really a number 8.
He's a number 6.
He's not a footballer in that way, and he's often a hazard at the base of a scrum, and even just the type of plays. I know people say the number of the back doesn't matter, but there's a skill. It does in some ways. You know, there's a skill element to the number 8 position.
The number 8. The secret that Ireland haven't realised, like even though Jamie Heaslip is the best number 8 we've ever produced and was a phenomenal distributing and footballing player, the number 8 is a distributor. Like your distribution doesn't start at 9, it starts at 8. It's 8, 9, 10 are your distributing guys. The 8 is the link between the backs and the forwards. He needs to have a passing game, and you see it with big Dwayne Vermeulen at his absolute best in the World Cup last year, where he was dominating the contacts when the carry was on, but he was also slipping lovely little passes, skip passes, drawing the men with his heft and giving the ball, which is something that CJ does not bring. No, number 8.
CJ is very
and then
very
the other option that they might go for is Rhys Ruddock, who has been impressive in the Pro 14, but he's also not a distributing number 8. You need a guy with hands.
I don't really see Ruddock getting in. I suspect what they're going to do is either what I would love to see them do is put Henderson in the lock with Ryan, and then do CJ, Peter O'Mahony, and Ty Byrne at number 8.
Yeah.
Because I think Ty Byrne, there's merits to him as a back row forward. He is a good footballer.
He's a good jackler.
Quick speed. He's a good jackler. He's also revered in Wales. He played in Wales, and they love him and they fear him and they respect him. Yeah. And that's a dynamic. For sure, that's a dynamic in this game. Yeah. So I think I wouldn't mind seeing him get in as a number 8. I wouldn't love to see him in at lock. I don't think he's physical enough, as I said. But what I suspect they might do is put him in at lock, drop Ian Henderson, and then go with O'Mahony back at 6, one of Josh O'Connor's, and CJ at 8, and I think that's a more rudimentary model for Ireland's pack, and which we've had less success with and can be easier to deal with.
It's a small part of the problem. It goes to us being the worst passing team in Tier 1 when our number 8 can't pass and our number 9 does all the passing, and Sexton's at 10 and kicking mostly. It's a concern. We need to be able to move the ball.
At halfback, we've got Conor Murray and Gibson Park are the 2 front runners. Craig Casey's in the squad as well. That's an experienced gainer.
Yes, indeed, and it's good to see a bolter. Like, he's played great for Munster, to be honest. It's good seeing good young scrummies coming out there. I still don't know what Marmion has to do to get a look in, or to be honest, because
he's gone the way of Ben Spencer. He's done.
It seems that way. Connacht win loads of games with their backs and lose them with their forwards, and yet Ultan Dillane and Quinn Rue get in, and Marmion can't get a look in. I don't understand.
I do hear you on that. But I suspect they'll go with Murray to start. I know Gibson Park had the jersey for a few games, and I certainly wouldn't hate to see it from a tempo setting point of view. But I think Murray's form has been decent. His box kicking's been on a dime, and I just think they're going to trust him. Yeah. Sexton is captain. He's going to start at 10. No arguments there. Interesting to know who will come on after 20 minutes when Sexton goes down.
Yeah, when his hamstring acts up again, or the dead leg.
It'll probably be Billy Burns, which I don't necessarily hate, because Ross Byrne just at the moment sits way too deep and kicks and doesn't play well. Billy Burns at least is just like a foil for other players to work off, and he moves.
He's
the
a little
ball
bit
fine.
like a French 10, to be honest.
He
is what he is. He sits a little deep and passes, but he
moves the ball a bit.
Yeah,
he doesn't make as many mistakes as Ross Burns.
No,
so
he doesn't.
I think Billy Burns will be the backup there. Centres is going to be Henshaw and Ringrose. Maybe Bundyaki over Henshaw, but probably not.
Yeah. Aki hasn't actually been playing as much for Connacht. It's been Tom Daly of late. He's been out with kind of niggling injury, so it's got to be Henshaw.
Ringrose. Outside backs, interesting decisions to be made here. Hugo Keenan has locked down the fullback
I would hope so, but
he's a quality fullback.
He's been brilliant.
When you consider how tough Ireland have found it to deal with the kicks in behind,
and they're coming off the back of having Rob Kearney there for over nearly a decade, which is just rock solid.
Failed so badly to deal with attacking kicks. You look at the England games and even the French game where they gave away that penalty try, and they need Keenan has plugged a lot of holes for them, and they need to keep him in there at 15.
They do.
And then the wings is a horses for courses. I mean, I'm not sure how fit James Lowe is. He could get in. Larmour, you feel like, could get in. Stockdale's injured for this week. I reckon it'll be Earls and Larmour. Yeah. If I was to guess.
Earls' form has not been great, but
no,
I would not be. He's never dropped for
Ireland.
He's just never dropped for Ireland.
Yeah.
Shane Daly is another exciting talent who's in there as an option as well. I don't expect we'll see him in this game, but we might see him in games to come.
Probably not.
Maybe the Italy game. Maybe the Italy game is usually the thing, but from a squad point of view, as I said, there's a fair bit of talent, but there's also some unlucky to miss out. From the tight head point of view, or from just the people missing out, we have no Sean Cronin or Marshall for the hookers, no John Ryan and Michael Bent, two very fine tight heads who are missing out as well. Alan O'Connor and John Klein and Dev Toner, three locks who might have been there but aren't.
Indeed. It's the interesting one is actually at scrum half, where they've basically decided no Luke McGrath, no John Cooney. They basically decided Murray's the better footballer than them in that kind of mould, and then they want Gibson Park as a tempo setter and Casey as a young bolter to learn. So they've left a lot of talent out. No Caelan Blade, obviously, no Marnie, and no Cooney and no McGrath.
And then the other dynamic is 10, where all the backup 10s are not that convincing, and there are ones outside, you have Ross Byrne and Billy Burns are the ones in the squad, and then out of the squad you have Jack Carty, Harry Byrne, Kieran Frawley, Ben Healy, all of these guys who've played out at 10 and haven't quite got the look in yet, but it's still Sexton's the guy, but I suppose with that
from an offensive point of view, looking beyond the squad, let's say there's things to be learned from the squad. Like we've often talked about the potential benefit of getting another distributor in there just to allow Ireland to move the ball to expand the field and stretch defences. But it's pretty clear that they're not doing that. There is no bolter second distributor in the squad. No. So it's going to be flowing through 9 and 10, and so their offense, it's, as I said at the start, it's hard to get a read on exactly what they want to be right now. Andy Farrell's talked about getting them to play more heads up. There hasn't been much evidence of that in the play, but for me it goes back to that play that we highlighted against England in November. We talked about a lot already today when they had that great hit up, great second phase, and then the third phase was another hit up before a kick. And actually, if you pause the screen, if you do a freeze frame as Murray picks it up, or whoever it was picks it up off the base of the ruck, there's all kinds of potential in that fractured defence after those first two positive phases. It's on Murray and Sexton. Now that day was Ross Byrne at 10, and I can't quite remember who was at 9. It might have been Gibson Park again, young guy, only just come into the team. Without them, the reason that Murray and Sexton are going to be in there is to run the offense. You would think it's on those guys to expand Ireland's attacking game by noticing those things. I don't think they're going to try and change the script. I still think they're going to be about hard running, but Sexton and Murray need to move them into less constricted avenues. And the first phase can be a lovely Henshaw line picked between 10 and 12. It will be. It always is. Second phase around the corner, back rower's going to smash it up. All of a sudden it takes 2 to tackle him. Third phase, can we get the ball quick, and can Sexton and Murray between them identify where the holes are in the defence? And that's the only difference. Ireland just need to be able to move the ball into the space a bit more
rather than jerseys,
and that's on Sexton and Murray.
Yeah, no, it is. Yeah,
a lot of the time in the last couple of years, those two have been way too lax on attacking and way too comfortable just letting forwards do the work and then kicking the ball in the air. And hopefully we milk a penalty advantage, at which point we can go chaos all time. It's been very, very one out rudimentary stuff, and it's on those two guys to expand us and to start probing a bit more. And that's, for me, that's the whole key to it.
Yeah.
Apart from everything else. I know we've talked about Ringrose coming in and being more of a passer.
He does offer a bit more of a passing option than, like, when he's out, as we saw towards the end of last year, they become very blunt because it's some combination of Aki, Henshaw, Farrell, and they're all not passers.
They're all kind of the same player.
Yeah, they're very, very physical on defence, very physical, and on the carry, not good.
They can
passers.
all offload, but not pass.
Yes, there's a distinction with difference between offloading and passing. Like, if you have the space, there's a try on, it just involves a 20-yard skip pass or just a 20-yard spin pass out there to the wide channel off your left hand. None of those guys are throwing that pass, whereas Ringrose probably is. So he recognises the space and can execute the skill. But we're not reinventing the wheel. What we could hope to see is Keenan's kick return acumen, which he does have good prowess in. It would be lovely to see us transition nicely and hopefully score some points off that. That's my key goal for Ireland, is to score a kick return try.
It's not happening.
Off the same phase, and it doesn't count if you kick return to the 22 and then 20 phases later the try comes. I want it to be a the first phase, like run it in for a try.
None of the Six Nations against Wales.
I know.
Chances are this game's going to hinge on the kicking game as much as anything else.
Yeah, there'll be Murray box kicks.
Murray box kicks have been good of late. They have been putting teams under pressure. You watched Leinster against Munster get really hard done by under those box kicks at times, and Murray nearly orchestrated a win for Munster in that game, but it proved not enough. I would love to see them try and work the pendulum a bit more. My suspicion is that Wales will be more than ready for the box kicking game. They'll have bigger in position, they'll have Halfpenny in position, they'll be ready to make plays on the ball. Even Josh Allen's extremely solid in the air. I think they need to be, as we've said, they need to be a bit more clever in terms of where they're attacking, and that goes for the kicking game as well. Like, they need to work the pendulum. They need to find and isolate. I think whether it's Rhys Sammet or George North, either one of those is going to be their worst high ball.
Yeah, and it's not just high ball. Like, both wingers have a tendency, Josh Adams too. It's just been true of Wales forever, in memoriam, is that on the multi-phase defence, their wingers tend to just drift up. The pendulum can be disrupted, which is where a bomb isn't the correct option, because it gives them time when the ball's in the air to actually cover the space.
A lot of the time
finders,
what Wales will do is put Halfpenny and Bigger in the backfield as well. Yeah. And obviously that's tough, but getting Halfpenny up or getting Bigger this way, just disrupting it with some bit, like that's what I mean when I say expand the field, is make the defence defend the whole pitch. Yeah, like make it
so much easier when you're defending in bunches around the ruck.
Indeed,
it's easy to make a tackle.
You have to have threats all over the pitch, and that's what Ireland need to bring. So it's not about reinventing the wheel. It's just about playing a little smarter and with a bit more leadership from the guys who are running the attack, which is Sexton and Murray. And then outside of that, I have confidence that the guys can make good plays, can carry well, that, you know, if the ball does fall to a Keenan or a Larmer, they will make things happen. And Ringrose will make things happen, but it's on Sexton and Murray to put them in the right places. That's where
I would also like to see Faith put in Gibson Park if he's on the bench, or even Casey if he's on the bench, to mix that up. I would like to see them given some minutes if it's tight. I don't think they will, though. I think they'll probably stick with Murray, but I would love to see an injection of tempo. And then what I'd be very disappointed to see, which is something we've seen from this Ireland team with Gibson Park at 9 in last year in towards the end, which is so disappointing. It was something that you saw a bit from the Springboks when Faf de Klerk first got in, where the scrum half's moving at 1,000,000 miles an hour, he wants to set a tempo, and the forwards aren't keeping up. They're not actually folding into their shape quick enough. Even though they've generated quick ball, they're on the front foot and they're just too slow for the passes. And I don't want to see that. I want to see a quick Ireland that, even if they're doing things a bit rudimentary and a bit like they're not using the full length of the field, still do it quickly. Like things like fundamental carries. Like we've seen them before. We saw them in the England game. You were citing it, that just the first up carrying, like nothing can go right if you're carrying so statically, and they were, and then they managed to fix that towards the tail end. They were
almost fatigued by that game, but it's fatigued by the rudimentariness, and then after a certain point in time, you're almost staggering to the ball to carry it. Yeah, like one good dynamic carry is as good as 3 bad ones, if not better.
It's better, indeed.
So I mean, that's definitely a lesson Ireland need to take for sure.
And the other thing is just in terms of a team's identity, Ireland are not the biggest, strongest, meanest team in the world. They just aren't. Sometimes we think we are, and that's silly. Like in terms of identifying your strengths, I think Ireland at their best are a very clever, wily team. and at their worst, they're the opposite. They go fundamentally stupid very quickly, especially if they're 2 scores down and chasing. They're very bad in that scenario. But at their best, they can be very, very difficult to play against because they keep their discipline and because they're quite smart. They move you about intelligently, ask you interesting little questions and try and outsmart you, outwork you, and then ultimately outscore you slowly but eventually. And that's kind of their picture.
For sure. And like, listen, there's been a lot of high profile conversations and certainly the Ireland media about just how blunt Ireland's attack is. What's gone slightly more under the radar is, like, in a year that rugby was about defence more than anything, Ireland's defence really, really struggled. It certainly struggled to cope with teams who moved the ball at speed and who tried to attack from deep. I mean, against England in the Autumn Nations Cup, I think what's the stats here? I have them. They held Eddie Jones' men to 39% possession, 41% territory, conceded 3 tries and 24 points. Pretty, like, when you consider that territorial and possession domination, 61% possession, conceded 3 tries nonetheless.
It's no good.
Against France in the Six Nations, again last autumn, the delayed game, they held Les Bleus to 40% possession, 40% territory, 36% possession. Incredible numbers, and conceded 4 tries and 35 points. Dreadful returns. Like, they spent so little of these games defending and still conceded bucket loads.
It's really bad. It reflects badly on your own conversion rate when you have that much ball and you don't score. But then when you're conceding that much and you're holding the ball for that long, it's crazy.
As you pointed out, they suffered for the lack of a Rob Kearney. Keenan seems to have come in and solved some of those issues. He only got the fullback betting towards the end. They also managed to get towards the end when they were playing Wales and Scotland, they managed to get a lot more disruption around the breakdown area. It's crucial for them. O'Mahon, he's such an important player.
It's a big part of their identity for years. They've always had jackal threats and breakdown threats. The breakdown should be a scrap. It's an Ireland-Wales game. The breakdown should be a dogfight.
They've struggled when they've let teams get tempo. And when they've let teams get tempo, it has been kind of brutal to watch. I mean, you look at that Johnny May try again, and like as much as a great try,
from you watch it from a green lens, and you're like, tackle.
Well, he does a stutter step on the outside.
Does Chris Farrell?
Everybody stops. Farrell kind of falls over. Earls doesn't know whether to cover him or his outside man, and just freezes. And Porter is like way too slow to come across and isn't anywhere near him.
Tight head.
He's still in the line, and it was just. They just ghosted past them, and then from there it was just a foot race. He outran everybody. But I mean, it was very, very easy. You look at the same thing in the French game. One of the worst tries. It was a beautiful try. Now I think it was Ntamack or Dupont who got it.
Ntamack caught it.
But it was the one off the Sexton bomb, and we were hoisted by our own petard when Boutier caught it and just instantly moved it. And they were very, very sluggish on the outside. So listen, slowing down the tempo is important. Every team that plays against them, including Wales, should be looking to ratchet up the tempo when they have the ball. But, like, they do need to be able to move with a bit more speed from a defensive point of view and just not be as soft in the tackle and not be as sluggish to react. The whole season last year could have been categorised as sluggish at times. And when they made the game sluggish, they won. And when they couldn't, they lost.
Indeed.
And that's definitely a huge work on for them because, those returns in the big games are very, very poor.
And considering the head coach is someone who built himself on a defence coach things, those numbers need to be much better. Sure, you were citing England's numbers in terms of points conceded and how phenomenal that was. Ireland need to be a bit tougher to break down.
And I can't overstate how important Keenan's going to be solidifying up the defensive backfield.
He's a proper fullback instead of a winger at fullback or a centre at fullback as they've tried before. He's a fullback's fullback. He's very, very.
But he is a young man. It's a lot of weight on young shoulders. I suspect Wales and
Lee Halfpenny has more experience for sure. There's definitely concerns there. And then just in terms of the set piece, I guess, we'd be hoping for a repeat of what happened at scrum time the last time with Porter there dominating and having Furlong returning. You'd expect Ireland to have the edge. Wales will surely, and Ken Owens coming back, have addressed this a little and not quite be as brittle as they were last year.
I don't see it being a major area of attack. In fact, I don't see it being a problem this week, but down the line I have concerns at loosehead. I think Cian Healy's very much getting on. I think only having one out-and-out loosehead as backup, especially when it's a guy who's coming off an injury himself and we don't know how he looks, that's silly. That's potentially a problem going forward. But outside of that, they should be looking for solidity. Set pieces, and in terms of solving the puzzle, I think we've mentioned it a lot in this podcast, but I say it to reiterate it. In terms of solving the puzzle as to why rugby's so defensive, set piece goes a long way to answering it.
Yeah.
And when the defensive line is necessarily 10 or 5 meters back, and there's either 20 meters or 10 meters of space between the two lines, that much is more attacking. The chance to attack is going to be first, second, third phase off set piece. That's where you can get it.
Yeah.
And I think from Ireland's point of view, just being solid at the line out and solid at the scrum, as it is for everybody, needs to be the key point.
They do need to be rock solid at the scrum. They have wilted a little last season, where they had been pretty imperious at scrum time for many seasons.
Yeah, they're not at that level
They're not
anymore.
Quite at that level. But
although Furlong could be disruptive.
No, he could be disruptive as well. But one thing that has to change is their line out. And as I mentioned earlier on, Paul O'Connell is a great, savvy addition to the coaching ticket. Because that we have a lot of young locks, a rotating kind of group of hookers who've none of them have quite claimed the jersey fully. Like there are incumbents, but it's been shifting around and it's in flux. The line-out really hasn't been as dominant as it used to. They were very used to having Dev Toner in there, who made their scrum a little weaker but made their line-out pretty close to flawless. And then prior to that, you had Paul O'Connell as the player who was one of the best line-out operators in the world. We don't quite have that level of nous, but we do have him in the coaching ticket. It's good going forward to have the likes of James Ryan Baird, Ian Henderson, learning from him, and hopefully this we'll see some good line-out play, because up against Alan Wynne-Jones, it's a big test in week 1.
It is. Listen, after going through all of that detail and going on and on for, I'm sure, forever. I'm not quite sure how long, but I'm sure
quite a while. Too long.
Where do you think this game is going to be won and lost? How do you think? Well, not that, but who do you think is going to win the game?
Well, who do I think versus who I'm going to say I think is maybe a different thing. Like, normally in this fixture, I kind of err on the side of the home side is just favourites. That being said, going into every Six Nations, I predict an Ireland Grand Slam, because I predict with my green lens and my heart. So I'm going to say Ireland edge it in a one-score game.
It's interesting.
But it's based on, Ireland were the better team last year, did beat them, the last time they met it was 32-9. In terms of the club sides, all 4 provinces are ahead of the Welsh provinces in the Pro 14. Now, that being said, a lot of this Welsh side are playing their rugby. A lot of their key men are playing their rugby in the Premiership.
For me, it's all about Wales. I mean, as much as it pains, I think Ireland, if any improvement, is going to be sort of incremental, slow improvement. And I think while they could get better and they could be very good, I think it's really all about what Wales bring, and I don't quite know what to expect from
neither
Wales.
do I.
But the evidence of what we saw under Pivac so far is a team that's just way, way beneath where Ireland are.
Yeah.
And I don't know if they're bridging that gap. They should come out and hustle and disrupt Ireland, but I don't know if they quite have the confidence and cohesion, and whether the sponge has returned to any kind of...
Yes, indeed. Well, it's tough to see where that's coming from, because a lot of these guys, there's some young talent to come through, but like Alan Wynne-Jones is still a stalwart and still a key man. It's him and whoever else, and none of the other locks are on his level. And then you look at the back row, Lydiot's coming back in. That's like as good as it could be, and he has been Irish kryptonite before. That's looking back rather than forward. Are they producing that much talent? You look at the backup 10s, Dan Biggar just has the jersey because the other guys aren't on his level. Jonathan Davis is still going to be in there. Lee Halfpenny's still going to be a fullback. Ken Owens is back in.
Yeah, it's very much the same old Welsh. But that Welsh team did get to a World Cup semi-final and has done for Ireland so many times.
It's tough to say because it does flip and flop, but the broader concern for Wales, and it was a concern even in the last few years, it felt like Gatland was keeping together a team and making them play to more than the sum of their parts, or to the ultimate, like you said, squeezing the most out of the sponge, whereas you were watching their provinces or their clubs be absolutely abysmal a lot of the time, and
you wonder if that's catching up.
You're still seeing their clubs be abysmal most of the time, and surely that does catch up eventually. You need to have good grassroots rugby to produce good top flight rugby, and maybe that's the story for Wales. That being said, maybe Ireland aren't clinical enough, and maybe they're a dominant showing but they only put 14 points on the board, and then Wales nick it at the end. Is definitely
it's
potential.
hard to know. It is hard to know. I think I'll say that Ireland will get it done. I think they're just probably that bit better player for player, and then will make enough plays, and I think Sexton and Murray have a point to prove, and will come out and play effective rugby, and that'll be enough.
I hope so.
Yeah, so I'm going to say Ireland by a score of 19-10.
19-10. I'll say 22.
Look at
15.
you going high.
I'll say 22-15.
There you go.
Which is the same ish.
Yeah, well,
with one score.
One score game.
That's it's kind of classic Six Nations stuff in terms of the scoreline. We'll say that, and I suppose then we will move on
at long last.
And that is the Six Nations. But there is other rugby to talk about, and we will pivot on to the Rugby Europe Championship Tier 2. It's good to give it a cast at an eye because after 10 months on from the previous fixture, Georgia finally managed to seal the competition.
When Georgia sealed the competition with a 39-24 victory over Portugal 10 months ago.
Yes, yeah.
So they have had the trophy for 10 months, and
did they get? Well, I suppose they had it from the previous year anyway.
Yeah, sure, they got to lift it. It's not a big deal, Georgia winning this trophy.
No, this is usually Georgia's trophy. But what is fun is that in this last round of fixtures, you have Spain v Portugal, which is in fact for second place.
It's a great game. We got to see both of them playing last year. Both looked good.
They both
Portugal's
play
absolute destruction of Brazil was awesome.
Yes, it was. They were very, very quick. They looked kind of downright Argentinian at times in terms of how they moved the ball very quickly.
I'm looking forward to that game. That's a curtain raiser. The three games this weekend. I'm kind of jumping ahead here on us.
Yeah, sorry.
The games are Romania against Belgium. That is, I believe a bottom of the table clash. It is in fact. Romania take on Belgium. This is the last round of 2020's tournament. All of these games are on Sunday. The first one, Romania-Belgium, 9:15 a.m. Greenwich Mean Time, which is 11:15 a.m. local. That'll be played in a football stadium in Craiova, Romania. Romania is an interesting one here because they have this saga going on with their new stadium.
They built it during lockdown. I read this at the start of lockdown 1, which was very strange because obviously all unions are like reporting absolute no money, windfalls from the government, nothing to do. And meanwhile, Romania built a brand spanking new rugby stadium with undersoil heating so that it doesn't freeze over, which it has a tendency to do, and it prohibited their club sides from playing in the Challenge Cup in Europe because their pitch was frequently unplayable. So they built that. They got a new coach in. They got Andy Robinson, high profile coach, in to coach their national side. And it's like, Romania investing in rugby, and they had been good. They had been toe to toe with Georgia before falling off.
I don't know where that money has come from. I don't know what Romanian billionaire rugby fan has decided to take it upon himself. But good luck to him, whoever he is.
It's good hustle. We need more benefactors like that. But this saga continues because the new sport minister in Romania, I can't remember his name, Edward something, has launched a campaign to annex the stadium for football purposes.
Yeah.
It's like, what are we wasting this brand new stadium on the rugby team for? Give it to a football club. Yeah. So says the government.
I like this stadium, and take it away. So the Romania is trying to stop it from being annexed by the government at the moment, and could use the support of Rugby Europe and all the rugby institutions that exist, and obviously hopefully the courts over there to make it. It's hard to know because I have no idea how they funded this project.
Yes,
but it seems bizarre that they can just have the stadium taken away from them. But as it is, they're not going to be able to play there at the moment. For whatever reason, they're playing in a football stadium, which is actually a cool stadium as well.
Yes, it is.
Another big one, but I don't think they'll have any crowds out in Romania either for the same reasons as the rest of us. But they open with a game against Belgium, which is bottom of the table, but Romania definitely ones to watch going forward, investing in the game, and they do have proper rugby pedigree. The second game is between Georgia and Russia, which is obviously a ferocious rivalry. That's at 11 a.m. Greenwich Mean Time. Straight after that game, it's at 3 o'clock local time in the Mikhail Meshki Stadium in Tbilisi. Georgia, obviously top of the table, have the championship sewn up, playing for yet another Grand Slam.
Russia, we saw a bit of them in the World Cup. They managed to get in. You would have remembered some of their players. They have some decent hustle in them. They probably will be smothered by this Georgian team.
Yeah, they've fallen away since that World Cup. They're fourth in the table. They're behind Spain and Portugal, and I wouldn't suspect anything but a Georgian victory there. The interesting game kicks off bizarrely 45 minutes later than the Georgia-Russia game. So during that game, Spain and Portugal play at 11:45 on Sunday morning, Greenwich Mean Time, 12:45 local time. In Madrid, and the Estadio Nacional Complutense in Madrid.
Yeah, it could be a cracker.
That is a great game. Yeah. That both of those teams love attacking. They play similar styles. It's also a dress rehearsal for what will likely be a shootout for World Cup.
Yes, this could have World Cup qualifier credentials all over it.
It absolutely does, and it's going to be a huge, it could be a telling factor in terms of like who
it'll
has the memory of beating each other recently, because
Yep.
it's going to be based on the World Cup is going to be based on 2021 and 2022 Rugby Europe competitions, so not this game, but it's going to set the stage quite nicely between those two
It's
teams.
always better to have won the last game out against a team than
with
to have
the
lost
World
it.
Cup in France, just a stone's throw from both.
They're both going to
they're
fancy it.
So both going to want to be there. And Portugal were at the last World Cup in France.
Yes,
so they're
that's
highly
the last
motivated.
time Portugal were at the World Cup was when it was
Yeah.
hosted by France the last time. So that's an interesting dynamics
Yeah.
all over that one. So yeah, Spain v Portugal, one to watch from the Rugby Europe
Yeah,
Championship.
great curtain raiser for the for the Ireland game on Sunday.
Absolutely, and congrats again to Georgia, the Lelos, who we saw recently getting pumped in the Autumn Nations Cup. It is good to remind you that they are dominant in this competition.
Such a weird dynamic for Georgia,
Indeed.
always.
They're the reverse of Italy. Like Italy are just have
except
no
they,
chance.
They have
in
this
the-
experience of being All Blacks to a ridiculous extent, where they're untouchable, and then they try and play a tier 1 team and they can't get a glove on them. It's
Yeah.
such a mad
It's a
dynamic.
crazy
They
thing.
need to play more games in the interim levels.
They do. This is where a Nations Cup would be a good
Yeah,
idea
yeah.
going forward.
Let's not go there.
Yeah, sure, look. Anyway, we will move on. That is International Rugby Park, but there is Club Rugby as well, and we're going to start by looking back on the Currie Cup, which we had been covering before. We kind of left it where it was in the melting pot. The Blue Bulls had claimed the halfway point Super Rugby Unlocked trophy that turned out to just be halfway through the Currie Cup thing.
Yeah.
So yes, they claimed that, but then they managed to top the table, and the grand final was ultimately boiled down to them and the Sharks, who I know you like the Sharks. You're a big fan of the Sharks.
They were looked one of the best teams in Super Rugby in the before the pandemic.
Yes, at the start of last year, they were bloody brilliant.
Went to New Zealand and pumped the Harlequins and beaten another couple of teams.
Pumped the who?
Harlequins, what am I talking about? Harlequins, jeez. The Highlanders. They went to New Zealand and pumped the Highlanders in Otago, and then they I think had another good win over, I think it was the Chiefs. Were winning all of their games, and then they came back from lockdown after the layoff.
They looked awful.
They had lost a few players. Nkosi was gone, Fassi was gone.
Was out with an injury for a wee while.
And they
had
lost
Werner Koch on the wing, who's a converted sevens man who couldn't feel the high ball.
They looked a lost force, and they never really got it back, despite getting some of the personnel back. They started the season terribly, the domestic South African season, came back into it and managed to sort of wily their way to the final, and all of a sudden they had a chance to win the competition.
And they were very close in that final. We watched the final as well, but for a few long Kerwin Bosch missed kicks, they could have won it. They went to extra time, so there was 100 minutes played, and then eventually the Blue Bulls were crowned champions in 2021. They were deserved winners. They were table toppers. They looked like they had more off the bench, especially in the extra time. It played to their advantage that it was on the Sharks to have to take the lead to win it in extra time. Because of that, it was going to be decided on thing. But then they made it more emphatic than that. They went and took a try.
They had a fantastic winning sequence where it seemed like they'd finally worn down the Sharks' defence, and their bench made the impact, and they just started owning the collisions and worked their way to the line and scored. And the Sharks were just a beaten force at that stage.
They were a spent force.
It was an interesting one watching them. They're a great defensive side. They have great hustle. And on another day, if Kerwin had kicked like he kicked in the semi-final, they would have won the game.
Yeah.
But they kept taking on these speculative 60-metre kicks every time they got a penalty. They never really seemed to have much interest in working tries, and as such, they came up short. A lot of the penalties on the day missed, and Kerwin's taken a lot of flack for that. But it probably does speak to their approach as much as anything
you need
else.
to kick some of them to the corner and try and attack, And the Bulls, to their credit, did go to the corner and did attack, and it was pretty rudimentary stuff, but effective. They just picked and jammed and wore them down.
They put together a nice sequence,
and they did
a nice match-winning.
They did, and they've had a lovely season. They've looked the best side in this competition since the resumed play after the long South African lockdown. They were the last teams to get back into it. But thorough congratulations to the Bulls. They will join the Pro 16 next year as champion sides. That's exciting. It sets up the potential Leinster Bulls clash with aplomb. It's exciting to see them as champs. And obviously the Rainbow Cup is probably not going to happen. It's still in the pipeline as potential.
Apparently it's still going on, but I can't see how it will with all these new strains and all this terrible virus stuff. But we won't dwell on that.
No, we won't. But we will.
It
see
is
them
going
next
to
year.
happen.
It is going.
The Pro
16 is going to happen, and we can't. We for one can't wait for it. Can't wait to welcome all those teams.
It'll be absolutely fun. Yeah, listen, there's also domestic rugby going on across Europe.
Yes.
The top couture still rumbles on. It is tight at the top, but a lot of good rugby in the top couture is coming out of it. We actually, they don't broadcast it abroad, so I'm only getting it in bips and bops and highlights and things. But there's a lot of great rugby. There's a lot of great rugby teams. Toulouse, La Rochelle and Racing, all offensive-minded attacking teams, are atop the table.
Good to see. Yeah,
very much in the mix. One of those three, the likes of Montpellier fading away on the other end of the table.
Yeah,
it's kind of, the top couture seems to be the league that's rewarding the best rugby at the moment.
Which is a reverse of where it was a few years ago when France were at their most rudderless and top coutures was at a slow bludgeoning affair. It's good to see offensive rugby at both domestic and top level in France. The top coutures rolls on nicely.
It does.
And then similarly in the Premiership, Pat Lam's Bristol, speaking of offensive chops, they top the table at the moment. And they are the form side in the competition. They've had a few stuttery performances against Exeter have had a few stuttery performances, but they're still only 5 points away, and they will beat most of the teams in that competition most of the time.
Just looking at the table here, Bristol have played 7 games, scored 25 tries. Solid return.
It's good.
93 points difference. Very much looking as a serious force to be reckoned with in that league. And Pat Lam, talk about just constantly every year just getting better and better.
No, it started in the championship, and since then he's gone like they're Challenge Cup champions right now, and they were top 4 last year. They were semi-finalists last year in this. I wouldn't put it past them going all the way this year.
On the other end of the table, Gloucester are bottom, 7 points from 7 games.
We saw them play a bit last weekend, and they just look abysmal. Obviously Danny Cipriani's gone. There's a hell of a lot of 12 trees.
I always felt like Ackerman was a great coach as well. I never quite understood why in that era when they had like Torley and Rhys Samet coming through, and then all of a sudden they signed Franco Mostert and they had Jaco Creel, and I was like, and I just didn't understand why it wasn't quite happening for them, and it feels like there's almost an organisational issue because they got rid of Ackerman, and I was like, was he the reason? He's done a great job with teams in times gone by, and I just didn't quite believe that he was the issue. And then sure enough they've gotten worse, since they lost him. It just, I don't know where Gloucester are and where they're going. It's just
been abysmal for quite a while. They did get that big win against Ulster, but that was a win they shouldn't have.
They're going to be in the European semi-finals. Not that they'll want to be if they're really facing relegation in the mouth. They're going to have to tighten up if they don't want to go down, which would be a shame to see for such a great club.
And they play such lovely footy when they're at their best. They can be very good to watch.
One of the great grounds. It's not nice to see Gloucester down there, and hopefully they can turn it around.
You'd sooner see, who do you want to get down there?
I'm not going to go there.
Who do you want to go?
I have an answer, but I'm not going to go there.
So and then the Pro 14 as well, our own domestic thing. The narrative hasn't really changed since last we talked about it. The Irish teams are still atop their respective
we've had a lot of derbies since we last talked about it, actually. That part of the season has played out, and as such there's been sort of better games. It was curious to see, we got to look at all of those other nations playing themselves over the course of lockdown. We've had like the big marquee South African derbies, the big marquee Kiwi derbies and Aussie derbies, and our one was Leinster-Munster over the Christmas, and it was quite a physical, slow, bruising kind of game. It's where Ireland are at the moment, and thankfully Leinster, being Leinster, did find the winning score and managed to dig it out and win it, but it was ugly stuff.
One for the purists, as they say. I thought it was not a great game, in fact, and I know I'm in the minority. A lot of people said it was a great game.
Well, it was a tight game. It was played to a higher standard in terms of the physicality of teams, but it wasn't encouraging, as it is in the broader context of rugby, just to see very little ambition.
Too much kicking, not enough passing, to no attacking space.
Until the
one score. We need to see a bit more. But at the same time, that the Irish teams are head and shoulders above the rest in terms of this competition.
And Leinster is still atop
of the Irish teams, but Munster are a coming force in terms of that. They're improving for sure. Ben Healy a good find for them. DLND a great signing for them. They have a few more strings to their bow. Ulster still look very dangerous at times against a lot of other opposition, just not the Irish ones a lot of the time. Their clutch often letting them down. And Connacht are the ones that are closest to the pack. They're on actually a similar points total to all the Welsh teams. We're all hovering around 25, 26, but that is...
The Welsh teams are all quite well balanced, just without being able to cope with the Irish teams for the minute, and still missing some of that top talent. And as such, the Pro 14 is very staggered in terms of where teams are at the moment. Across just in terms of just a highlight as before we end the show and wrap it up, we're going to talk about there's other rugby coming up that we're going to be talking about. Super Rugby AU and Super Rugby AU kicks off on Friday 19th of February out in Australia. Super Rugby Aotearoa kicks off a week later. Then there's going to be a crossover competition in April.
That's great.
That's good to see. The Japanese Top League, which I believe a lot of which is viewable on YouTube, that commences on February 20th. So we might be dipping into that, or at least might be out of curiosity watching some games. In America, their calendar has changed, but their Major League Rugby and a Superliga Americana de Rugby, a South American competition. SLAR is how it goes down, yes. That's set to commence. Both of those competitions are set to commence in March as they play out a full domestic season building up to the Americas Rugby Championship in August. And that's really exciting to see, like a professional environment totally enclosed with the Americas, within the Americas. And I think only good things can come out of that.
I think that's the future of the game. In fact, is exactly that. So it's the club rugby happening all around the world, and it's great to see. And we'll be dipping our toes in as we do. We try to comment on all the rugby, not just the marquee rugby that's going on as well. So with that, we will move on to the rugby news of the week as well, which is our traditional way of ending the show. There were a few little bits. Rugby Australia has made a very interesting offer to host the Lions and South Africa in the tour this summer in their entirety, bubble them within the borders as they did for the Tri Nations, and do it that way.
It's an interesting one.
They'll probably want some of the monies.
They want some of the monies. I imagine the monies will be divided between the three of them. So it's not an ideal situation for South Africa, but there isn't an ideal situation for South Africa.
They want to get it played.
Really, the only way to do it, that would be, what South Africa want, which is the influx of everything. It's the influx of tourism. It's the influx of all of these fans, and then the ticket sales, the hype, all of it. Like, that's not where we're at the moment.
Indeed.
There's a lot of people who say you can't push it back to next year. I understand why not. From an Ireland point of view, we have a series with New Zealand scheduled. That's extremely exciting in its own right, and it would be a shame to cancel that. But if the Lions is this important to these teams, I don't really see the negative in pulling it back another year. I feel like that makes the most sense as a decision. I'm not in this decision-making position. I don't know how much money is at stake here and there, but it feels like a lot less to do it this year. It just feels like forcing it to do it this year. Obviously, worst case scenario in any context is games without crowds. There isn't really a benefit to doing it in South Africa without crowds, because
what's the point then?
What's the point? Exactly, is right. You're not getting any of the money anyway.
No. And the money is not limited to ticket sales, as you say. It's jerseys, pints, all the stuff that happens on foot of people being on foot, wandering around, hotels, all the service industry, all of that stuff.
So none of that's going to happen. So there isn't really much of a difference from a South African point of view between not doing it at all and doing it with no crowds. There's the broadcasting, obviously, and they will get incredible eyeballs.
Yes.
But it's not going to be the same or close to it. So as a solution, like if you're saying it has to happen this year, bringing it to Australia seems like a reasonable decision, because frankly hosting it in the UK and Ireland is going to be, chances are, as restricted. It certainly looks at this point it's going to be as restricted as it would be in South Africa.
Which means that you may as well do it in South Africa if you're going to do it that way. Although it would have been nice in one of those projections Leinster were going to be playing South Africa or something, and that would have been fun.
Australia are great angling for all these sporting events. What it would be like to be in Australia at the moment must be something great, just to have found yourself there. Because it would be super cool if they could get it, and if they have to do it this year, it seems to me to be the best solution. It
does,
provided the rugby players don't get as prima donna-y as the tennis players in what by all accounts is a pretty rigorous quarantine over there if you have to enter the country.
Yes. As it should be.
I know, but are they going to give out about the food and the...
Maybe not.
Let us out of quarantine. I don't know. It'd be funny. I hope not. I listen, if they host it there, it could be great. It could be a solution, but I would lean on the side of just like push it back a year. If it's that important, push it back a year and do it properly.
One would think that. It remains to be seen, but it was an interesting offer nonetheless. And then there was other news as well. The 4 home nations or whatever, the UK and Ireland, they're considering whether to launch a joint bid to host the 2031 World Cup, which is quite far away, 10 years from now. Hopefully we'll have crowds and all back by then. But a joint bid to host the Rugby World Cup. World Rugby officially opened the process on Monday for both the 2027 one and the 2031 tournaments, and those unions are weighing up for a bid for the later one, for the latter one for 2031. So it would be interesting. There has been things like that done before.
I don't want. It's funny when Ireland has had the 1991 World Cup. They had a couple of games in Lansdowne Road. I'm not sure if they did in '99. I don't think so. I don't think so. So I think it's just been the one time they've had games, and I wanted Ireland to give it a go hosting it. I didn't hate the 2023 World Cup, and I think we're more than well equipped to put together a great hosting of this competition. Perhaps probably before it gets too big.
Yeah.
We're a small nation, but we're not like New Zealand proved in 2011 that it's well doable.
It's well doable, and we have loads of stadiums.
Yeah. We would need to improve from a hospitality point of view, but we could. Geez, after COVID, it'd be the greatest thing. But obviously, we're talking far, far in the future. I just don't know why Ireland wouldn't consider like just sticking with the basically suckling at the teat of an English bid where you're getting like the odd game here and there. Doesn't feel right, and it doesn't feel like the right way to do it. No. I also think it's been done. That's the other thing. Like France, France are going to do a good job with the World Cup, but it kind of has to stop just cycling around the same countries every time. It kind of would get to you, wouldn't it?
It would. Well, they did Japan, so that naturally means that we need to
go
France,
right back,
and then England, and then maybe New Zealand.
No, France will put Australia. It's like come on. Like, can we maybe bring this to South America? Maybe we could bring this to somewhere else. Somewhere in the Americas would be an interesting shout. Even Spain or something mad would be an interesting shout. It just feels like the same old. England did do a great job with the World Cup the last time out, but I don't really understand the value to this joint bid. It just feels like Ireland conceding defeat and saying we're never going to host one of these things, which I don't like. I would sooner see us
host one.
Because if Ireland get the competition with the UK, they're never going to host it. They're never ever going to host it, and I don't think that's where our ambition should be. I think our ambition should be to try and host one.
Yes.
That's definitely interesting news, but I'm not vibing off that.
No, I'm not. We're not joined with those lads. We'll host it ourselves. God.
We do have another tidbit of news. Just it's not rugby news, but just in the context of Super Bowl weekend that we have here. On Sunday after all the Six Nations, there is a Super Bowl happening, and that is a big deal. Mm-hmm. And there's also some interesting news from a rugby angle in the NFL, which is that the Buffalo Bills, who just lost out on the Super Bowl the last time out, got beaten by the Chiefs, have re-signed Christian Wade, former England winger. He's been on their practice squad as a running back.
Yes.
And he's been trying to make it, and he's re-signed for the next season. So hopefully he can get some game
time in the NFL. That would be great for him. What a journey.
Yeah, he came in last season and played a couple of preseason games and had some great touches.
His first touch was a big touchdown, wasn't it? He ran through
something like that, or maybe like a 40-yard run or something. But like he's got the pace, he's got the hustle. I'd love to see him.
He was always lethal. He always found tries against Leinster when he was playing for Wasps. He's a danger man.
Yeah, the Bills. There was no preseason this year, so we didn't get a chance to see him at all. But I'd love to see him be given a proper go. I just think it would be cool to see a rugby guy swinging it in there, mixing it with the big boys.
Him as a running back would be great. I'm waiting to see a retired South African kicker turn up as a kicker in there, because I think there's such scope for it.
Isn't there?
Like just
Mornay Stain
pumping it from long. A lot of teams could do worse. There's some shocking kickers in the NFL. So good luck to Christian Wade for the 2021-22 season as well. That's kind of good news. And then the final bit of news, Ugo Monye was just saying that rugby should be focusing, and they absolutely vital that they have a good computer or console game of some kind for the growth of the game.
Yeah,
he was very adamant about that point, and it's an interesting point.
Just a tidbit I had. It's something that the internet rugby community has always been sort of
bitching about. The fact
asking for. Why don't we have this game? We still have Rugby 08 here on the PlayStation.
It's occasionally a fun old games to break out. It's not right at all. Like some of the AI on it is just hilariously bad, especially from a rugby fan's point of view. And maybe that's what he's screaming for, is just like what NFL. Speaking of NFL, Madden games are great and really well done.
FIFA is and that's That's massive. Like, in terms of America, that's really got them on board with the game almost more so than anything else.
Yeah.
Obviously they have a big women's team, etc. But they've really got on board with football as sort of this idea of the game because of FIFA. It's a common game that's played, and yeah, I definitely think having sort of a similar institution would be a benefit to the sport.
It is, yeah. It is a trickier sport to put together, I would imagine, in terms of just the dynamics of it and seemingly the way the games have been created. There's always a few like errors in it or things that just aren't quite accounted for.
It's tough, isn't it? Like when you've got, I guess similarly, like football's such an easy game. It's just so easy to make a game of a PlayStation game of that. You know, there's not too many subtleties and I'm sure there are, but there aren't really that many subtleties to the game of football to the extent that there are for rugby. And for the NFL, like obviously the Madden game is massive, and then but the way it's done is when you're calling all these plays to start everything off, you get to like not be in game and you're calling a play and this guy's going to go there and this guy's going to go there and that's fine, and then if it doesn't work you start again, whatever.
Yeah.
Whereas rugby, there isn't these stoppages in play where you can do this or that. And then you're wondering, like, what exactly are you going to be doing? Are you just playing the guy on the ball? Are you going to be putting moves together off rucks? Are you going to be able to call moves? Is there a rucking button?
Yeah.
Like, is there a way
tough.
to make it defensive shape, or are you just going to be one guy in the defensive line trying his best to do whatever he's going to do?
Running all over.
Yeah, how are the rucks going to work in a game format? Nobody's ever got it quite right.
No.
Like even Rugby 08 is just a bit.
Oh, it's comically bad at some of those things. The rucks are hilarious. Like, you are on defence, just one guy randomly going around and the other defensive line is doing nothing.
If your introduction to rugby was Rugby 08, you'd be baffled by an actual game of rugby. It's like, oh, this is what I've... This is nothing like this.
Indeed, yeah. That's been the issue thus far, and it's supposedly... It
and likewise, scrums and lineouts, I can't really think of a good way to transfer them to game format. Maybe lineouts, there is one, you know.
Well, X, circle, or square for front, middle, or back, but it's still pretty rudimentary, you know. Like it's tough, and it hasn't been and the other thing is it's not as big a game already, so it's tough to have. Like, if you're going to put that much effort and expense into it, you want to be guaranteed of some cash return, and you simply aren't with a rugby game. So it doesn't seem like it's in the pipeline, but it is a good idea, and it is an interesting point that Manya says.
Yeah, we need to get that Romanian billionaire to
indeed,
put it together for us.
Or maybe Bouchalal one, because Bouchalal could turn his attention to that.
That would be a productive
use his forces for good instead. Maybe, but I'm actually happy enough with him out of the game as it was.
Yeah,
but it'd be interesting to see. Hopefully, we'd buy it. You know, if there was a class new rugby game, we'd pick it up.
We wouldn't be the target market, though. It'd be interesting to see a game evolve as an institution in and of itself and actually help introduce people to the sport, especially young people.
It's true, and that is, like you said, FIFA's the great example, Madden is the other, and then there's all kinds of other ones. There's NBA games, and there's all kinds of sports games, and there isn't one for rugby. Tiger Woods golf games, though, all of that stuff. Probably should be for rugby. It's a good point.
Yeah, for sure, absolutely. Listen, we are probably out of things to talk about.
We are. Another long one, but we
at some point, do we have to admit this is just how long
this is just how long the shows are, I guess. Yeah, we just talk for ages.
We just never stop. Listen, we have waffled on probably for far too long. But listen, for those of you who have made it this far, I both respect and judge you. Listen, thanks so much for tuning in. We are going to be back next week. We're going to be talking about all things Six Nations rugby again. Yes. The competition is fierce. It's going to be good fun. It's great to have Test rugby back, and here's hoping for a few surprises and a few. Not that I'm too judgmental. I love the game of rugby, but let's hope for some offense. Let's root for some offense this week.
Some beautiful, crisp Irish passing on way to their Grand Slam. With
Finn Russell
points.
Turns it on, smokes the English. France and Italy, 30-all draw.
All of that lovely stuff.
Yes.
And sure.
We're here to review all that.
Exactly. And if you are on board for our long form rugby chatter as it is, please do like, subscribe, share the video with your rugby loving friends, and mainly do drop a comment down below as well, because we love hearing your opinions as well, not just ourselves too.
Indeed. A broad conversation, a community of vicious rugby nerds who are just
indeed
obsessed to an inhuman degree with this sport.
Indeed.
Let's get together and share our obsession.
Exactly right. Okay, with that we will wrap up. See you later, folks.
Bye-bye.
Right. First time in a while.
Yeah, I'm always first.
Gonna be dialed.
Oh my god.
It's crooked fate.
You wouldn't know I've been practicing darts, would you? Maybe you would.
I skimmed the top of it, but it was
better than mine.
Yeah.